Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The rain began slowly, barely a whisper against the trees, but soon it grew into a steady patter. Each droplet was a soft murmur, until it was the only sound that mattered. The woods were silent otherwise, the kind of eerie quiet that made every crack of a branch or sway of a leaf feel deliberate. Moss clung to the bark of towering pines, and the mist from the rain wrapped itself around the trunks like a thick, suffocating veil. The air was damp, cool, and smelled of earth, of something ancient, of a place untouched by the rush of the world beyond. Your footsteps splashed in the mud, echoing lightly as you walked along the narrow, winding path. The lodge was close now, just ahead, its silhouette partially obscured by the fog, like a forgotten dream. The path was uneven, strewn with rocks and roots, as if the forest itself didn't want anyone to leave. But the promise of warmth, of shelter from the relentless rain, was enough to keep you moving forward. You finally reached the lodge's door, the wood darkened by years of exposure to the elements. It was heavy old. The rusted handle creaked as you turned it, the sound sharp in the silence. Inside, the air was different, drier, warmer. You stepped in and closed the door behind you, the sound of it latching almost comforting, as if the outside world was shutting out with it. The fire crackled in the hearth, and a single lamp flickered in the far corner, casting a soft glow on the room. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with strange, dusty trinkets. A heavy silence hung over everything, as though the lodge itself had been waiting. You were not alone. The warmth of the fire was a welcome relief against the chill of the damp night, but something about the silence felt wrong. It wasn't the stillness of peace, but the stillness of waiting, of something holding its breath. You looked around the room at the old furniture, the shelves lined with knickknacks and old books. Each piece seemed too still, too perfect, as if they hadn't been touched in years, perhaps even decades. A faint creak echoed through the wooden beams above. You froze, your pulse quickening. It was subtle, so subtle it could have been a trick of the wind, but something shifted in the air. A low murmur, almost imperceptible, seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, like the lodge itself was alive, breathing softly beneath your feet. You glanced at the fire, its orange glow casting dancing shadows on the stone walls, their jagged surfaces uneven, as if they had been carved out by something ancient. The flames flickered as though they too were uneasy. The firelight caught something on the shelf, an old, tarnished lantern. Its glass was cracked, the metal handle rusted, but there was something unsettling about it, like it didn't belong there. Without thinking, you crossed the room, drawn to it. As your fingers brushed against the cold, worn metal, the sound of the storm outside seemed to intensify. The wind howled through the trees, sending rain pelting against the windows. For a brief moment, you wondered if it had been raining this hard when you arrived, but that question dissolved quickly as you turned the lantern over in your hands. Suddenly, the murmur returned, clearer now, a soft whispering sound, almost as if someone was speaking just beyond the walls, too faint for you to make out the words. A chill ran up your spine. You weren't sure if the sound was real or just your mind playing tricks on you, the isolation of the lodge beginning to affect your thoughts. You placed the lantern back on the shelf, but the whispering didn't stop. It wasn't just in your mind. It was real. You could almost feel the words in the air, vibrating against your skin. The whisper seemed to be coming from the far corner of the room, near a small old door you hadn't noticed before. The door was wooden, its surface weathered and cracked, almost as though it had been shut for ages. The knob was worn smooth by years of use, but it didn't seem to have been turned in quite some time. The air grew thicker, the whispers louder. It was as if something or someone was trying to reach you from the other side. You moved toward the door, a sense of dread creeping into your chest. Your hand hovered over the doorknob, your heart hammering in your chest. You wanted to turn back, to shut the door and return to the fire. But curiosity pushed you forward. With a deep breath, you twisted the handle. The door opened with a groan, the hinges protesting against the intrusion. Behind it was a narrow, steep staircase, leading downward into the darkness. The air smelled musty, stale, as though the very earth had been sealed off for too long. You stepped forward, each step creaking under your weight. The whispers grew louder as you descended, now more distinct, more urgent, as if they were calling to you, beckoning you deeper into the lodge's belly. At the bottom of the stairs, you were met with a cold, oppressive darkness. A single, dim light flickered in the distance, barely illuminating the edges of what seemed to be a stone wall. The whispering was now deafening, almost unbearable, and your heart raced in your chest. It felt like it was all around you, closing in, the air heavy with the weight of secrets. The walls felt alive, the stones themselves almost warm to the touch, as if they were breathing in time with your own anxious breaths. You took another step, and the whispering stopped, the silence more deafening than before. It was then that you saw it, a symbol carved deep into the stone. A strange, twisting pattern, almost like a sigil. The lines of the carving were worn smooth, as though they had been touched many times before. You reached out to trace it with your fingers. The moment you did, a low rumble echoed through the walls, and a burst of cold air swept through the room, making your skin prickle. The air around you seemed to shimmer, and for the briefest of moments, you thought you saw a figure, tall, dark, and faceless, standing in the far corner of the room just beyond the reach of the light. Your breath caught in your throat. But then it was gone. Just like that. The figure, the cold, the whispers, they all vanished. Was it your mind playing tricks on you, or had you truly seen something alive in the darkness? The silence pressed in once more, thick and suffocating. You were alone again, or so it seemed. But the weight of that moment, the feeling that you were being watched even now, didn't lift. You backed away from the symbol, your eyes never leaving the spot where the figure had stood. The air felt heavier now, thicker, as if it were pressing down on you from every side. You climbed back up the stairs, quickly shutting the door behind you, your hands shaking as you turned the handle. The fire in the lodge still crackled, still offered warmth, but it now felt distant, almost like an illusion. You could still hear the soft whispering just on the edge of your hearing, like the lodge was alive, watching, waiting. And then, from somewhere deep in the woods outside, a lone howl broke the silence. The howl echoed across the forest, long and mournful, a sound that sent shivers down your spine. It wasn't just any animal's cry, this was something deeper, something older. The howl carried an ancient, sorrowful energy that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the lodge. You stood frozen, your heart pounding in your chest. For a moment, you wondered if it was your imagination running wild, the isolation of the lodge and the strange happenings in the basement distorting your perception. But then you heard it again, a sharp, guttural growl from somewhere in the woods. It was close. The fire crackled louder, almost in protest, as if the crackling flames were trying to push back the sound of the forest. But there was something different about the night now. The wind had shifted, colder, harsher, and the rain beat against the windows with a violent rhythm. You stepped away from the window, pulling the heavy curtains tighter. The glass was fogged with condensation, and the outside world beyond was blurred, almost indistinct. You felt a chill rise up your spine again, stronger this time. Something was wrong. The whispers in the walls had stopped, but the presence of something unseen still lingered. The sensation that you weren't alone in the lodge, that something was watching you from the dark corners, was growing by the second. Every flicker of the fire seemed like a warning, every creak of the wooden beams above felt like an ominous omen. The howl sounded again, closer this time. A few seconds later, the ground beneath you trembled. The floorboards shifted as if something had just moved underneath, its weight heavy, deliberate. Panic began to rise in your chest. Was the howl coming from an animal or something else? Something that lived in the woods around the lodge. Something older than any creature you'd ever heard of. You backed away from the window, away from the looming shadows in the room. The door leading to the basement still stood slightly ajar, as though the mysterious force pulling you into its depths had been waiting for you to return. You hesitated. The pull was almost magnetic, like the lodge itself wanted you to descend back into the dark, to uncover the truths buried there. But the howl, followed by the tremor beneath your feet, reminded you that the forest itself was not to be trusted. You couldn't help but wonder if this was something deeper, something far more sinister than any creature roaming the woods. Taking a deep breath, you glanced back toward the fire. The flames had grown, now dancing wildly, their shadows flickering across the room, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. For a brief second, it looked as though the shadows were moving of their own accord, reaching out toward you with thin, claw-like tendrils. The door to the outside beckoned. You grabbed your coat from the chair and hesitated before reaching for the heavy wooden door. The storm outside had grown worse, but your curiosity and the rising dread urged you to step out into the unknown. You didn't know what you would find out there, but the forest call had begun to feel like a warning, something urgent that couldn't be ignored. When you stepped out onto the porch, the wind whipped at your face, a biting, stinging cold that sent a shiver through your entire body. The rain lashed against you, blurring your vision as the trees swayed violently in the storm's grip. The howl sounded again, closer now, definitely closer, coming from the deeper woods. You took a few steps forward, your boots sinking slightly into the muddy earth beneath you. The ground was slick with rainwater, and the air was thick with the scent of wet pine and damp earth. The darkness seemed to swallow everything whole. Even the sound of the storm seemed muffled, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Another growl echoed in the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large crashing through the underbrush. The trees groaned under the strain of the storm, but something else, something unnatural, was stirring in the woods. With each step you took deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, heavier, and the sense of being watched intensified. The further you went, the more suffocating it became. The branches overhead twisted and contorted, blocking out what little light remained from the storm. It was as if the forest was closing in on you, becoming tighter with every passing second. Then the ground underfoot changed. The soft earth became harder, more compact, and there was a faint sound, like the clinking of chains, just barely audible over the wind. You couldn't place where it was coming from, but it was unmistakable. You looked ahead, where the dark shapes of trees faded into an unnatural blackness. The howl rang out again, right on the edge of your hearing, but this time it was different. It was a scream, not an animal's cry, but a human scream, raw and full of terror. Fear gripped your chest as the last sliver of rationality slipped away. What was out here? And why was it so intent on luring you deeper into the woods? The answer came too late. You turned to run, but the ground beneath you seemed to shift. The trees bent and twisted, their trunks contorting unnaturally as the world around you began to close in. In the distance you caught a glimpse of something moving, something tall, skeletal, and impossibly thin. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness, bright as fireflies, its movements slow and deliberate. The howl sounded again. But this time it wasn't alone. Another voice joined it, faint, distant, but unmistakably human. A voice calling for help. A voice that sounded too familiar. Was it your own voice? You stumbled backward, heart racing, but the forest wouldn't let you go. The earth seemed to suck at your feet, pulling you deeper into the grip of the trees. You glanced around desperately, but the shadows were closing in. The world around you became a blur of dark shapes, twisting, screaming, waiting. And then, just as you thought you might be lost forever, the world fell silent. The forest held its breath. The silence that followed was suffocating. The world around you felt like it had stopped moving altogether, as though time itself was holding its breath. The trees were still, frozen in place, their twisted forms towering above you like silent sentinels. The howl had ceased, and the human cry that had echoed in the darkness was now nothing more than a distant memory, leaving only a lingering feeling of dread. You stood there in the cold, muddy earth, your heart hammering in your chest. The faint whisper of the wind was the only sound now, but it felt wrong, unnatural, like it was carrying something with it, something hidden just beneath the surface. You glanced over your shoulder, expecting to see the lodge standing tall in the distance. But the storm had thickened, the fog had rolled in even heavier, and the once familiar silhouette of the building was now lost in a sea of white. The forest stretched before you, an endless wall of dark trees and choking mist, like an impenetrable labyrinth. The air grew colder still, each breath you took feeling more labored than the last. The earth beneath you was soft, too soft, like it was swallowing you whole. Your boots seemed to sink deeper with each step, as if the ground itself was alive, pulling you toward the heart of the woods. There was a heaviness to the atmosphere now, an invisible weight pressing down on you from all directions. The crackling of the fire at the lodge seemed so far away now, a memory fading into the storm. The feeling of being watched had returned, but this time it wasn't just in the air. It was in the ground beneath your feet, in the trees surrounding you, in the very silence that hung in the mist. You weren't alone. A twig snapped behind you and you froze. The sound was sharp, deliberate, as if something was stepping on it intentionally, trying to get your attention. Slowly you turned, your eyes scanning the trees, the fog, trying to pierce the blackness that surrounded you. For a moment you saw nothing. Just darkness, and the looming silhouettes of trees stretching up to the sky, their gnarled branches twisted and clawing at the air. But then, just at the edge of your vision, you saw it, a shadow tall and thin moving against the wind. It was too quick to fully register, too fast to confirm. But it was there. Something was out there. Your breath hitched in your throat as the realization settled in. You were being hunted. A low growl echoed through the trees. It was soft at first, barely more than a vibration in the air, but it was unmistakable. It was close. Too close. Panic surged through you and instinct took over. You turned and ran. The ground was uneven, slick with rainwater, and the trees loomed overhead, their limbs reaching out like long, crooked fingers. Every step felt like you were being pulled deeper into the forest, the mist swallowing your path as you ran. You didn't know where you were going, didn't care. You only knew that you had to get away from whatever was lurking behind you, whatever had been watching you from the shadows. A crashing sound behind you, something large and fast. The growl grew louder, closer, and the trees seemed to close in, their branches snapping as if they too were alive, helping whatever was chasing you. The howls rose again, but this time they weren't distant. They were right there, just a few yards behind you, their primal voices cutting through the night like knives. You could hear the rustling of something large moving through the underbrush. You pushed yourself harder, your legs burning, but it felt like the forest was fighting you. The trees seemed to twist and shift, their roots reaching out to trip you, their branches slapping at your face as you tried to break through. The deeper you went into the woods, the more disorienting it became. It felt as though the trees themselves were closing in on you, trapping you in their grip. Your heart was pounding in your chest, and your breath came in ragged gasps, but you couldn't stop. You dared not stop. The thing behind you was getting closer, its growl growing louder and more distinct. It wasn't an animal, it was something else. Something larger. Something ancient. Then, without warning, you stumbled. Your foot caught on a hidden root and you fell hard to the ground, the impact sending a sharp pain through your chest. You gasped, struggling to catch your breath, your hands scraping against the wet earth as you tried to push yourself back up. The moment you did, you heard it. Footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate. Something was coming closer, its presence unmistakable. You looked up, panic surging through your veins as you tried to push yourself to your feet. The shadow in the distance was clearer now, moving between the trees. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and it seemed to glide rather than walk. Its form was obscured by the mist, but its eyes, those glowing, burning eyes, shone through the fog like twin beacons. It wasn't just watching you. It was drawing closer. With a last burst of strength, you scrambled to your feet and started running again, your legs screaming in protest. The path had disappeared, swallowed by the mist, and all you could do was follow the vague memory of the direction you had come from, hoping to make it back to the lodge. But the forest felt endless now. Every step seemed to lead you further into its depths, as if the trees themselves were turning, shifting, blocking your way. Then you heard it again, the howl. It echoed through the trees, and this time, it was followed by a second one, a deep, throaty roar that shook the air around you. Something was chasing you, and it was getting closer. You burst through a thick patch of underbrush, your heart racing as the path opened up into a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood something you hadn't expected, a circle of stones, arranged in an ancient, ritualistic pattern. The air around the stones hummed, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to resonate in your bones. It was a warning, a boundary. But before you could think, before you could understand, a flash of movement caught your eye. The figure was there, standing in the shadow of the trees, watching you with those burning eyes. It took a step forward, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath its weight. You didn't wait. You couldn't wait. Without thinking, you darted toward the circle of stones, praying that whatever this place was, it might protect you from the thing hunting you. The moment you crossed the threshold, a sharp, searing pain shot through your body, and you collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. The world around you spun, the edges blurring, and you felt the weight of the forest pressing down on you once more. And then, silence. The pain in your chest was overwhelming, as if something was pressing down on your very soul. You lay on the damp earth, gasping for breath, your mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. The forest around you felt heavy, as though it had become something solid, something you could touch, something that was no longer just a collection of trees and shadows, but a living, breathing entity. The moment you had crossed the circle of stones, the world had shifted. The air felt thick, charged with a strange energy that made your skin prickle. The stones themselves hummed softly, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to echo through your bones. The ground beneath you felt different, warmer, somehow as though it was alive, responding to your presence. You struggled to sit up, your limbs feeling sluggish, weighed down by an invisible force. The pain in your chest persisted, but it wasn't just physical. It was as though the energy in the air had invaded you, seeping into your very essence, and you could feel the weight of the forest pressing on your spirit. You could feel it watching. When you finally managed to push yourself to your knees, you looked around the clearing. The circle of stones stood tall, ancient, and imposing. Their surfaces were covered in moss and weathered by time, but they radiated a power that was both ancient and familiar. The mist had thickened, swirling around the stones like a living thing, and the trees beyond seemed to lean in, their twisted branches like fingers reaching toward you. The presence you had felt earlier was gone. At least it wasn't as immediate as it had been. But something was still there, lingering just at the edge of your perception. The howl, the growl, the unnatural noises from the depths of the forest, they had all stopped, but the silence was just as unnerving. The mist thickened further, and with it came the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic like the iron tang of blood. You tried to stand, but your legs were weak, your body trembling. Every movement felt heavy, as if the stones themselves were holding you down, tethering you to the earth. A voice, low and guttural, broke the silence, coming from somewhere deep in the trees. It was faint, a whisper on the wind, but the words were clear. "You are trespassing." The voice sent a chill down your spine, its tone dark and ancient, like something that had slumbered for centuries, waiting for its moment to awaken. The trees seemed to shift, their shadows stretching longer, curling around the clearing like tendrils. The whisper came again, louder this time, unmistakable. "This is not your land. You are not welcome here." Your heart began to race again. The presence was returning, this time more intense, more palpable. You could feel it closing in on you, a pressure building in the air. You knew that whatever had been hunting you, whatever had been lurking in the shadows, was no longer interested in keeping its distance. It was circling, and it was about to strike. You stumbled backward, your eyes darting around the clearing, desperate for a way out. But the stones, the circle of them, seemed to be the only thing holding the darkness at bay. It was as if the stones were a barrier, a boundary that the forest itself dared not cross. But how long would that hold? The voice echoed again, louder now, closer. "Leave now while you still can. There is no place for you here. Not anymore." A low, bone-chilling growl rolled through the air, vibrating through your chest. The wind picked up again, and the trees began to sway violently. The branches creaked and groaned as if they were protesting, like they were alive, angry at your presence. The mist thickened, swirling in rapid spirals, blotting out everything beyond the clearing. The world seemed to shrink, the shadows becoming darker, closer. From within the mist you saw movement. Something large, something that did not belong in the world of the living, was moving toward you. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its form was indistinct, barely more than a shadow. Its eyes, those gleaming eyes, burned with a fiery intensity, illuminating the mist around it like twin lanterns. You scrambled to your feet, heart pounding in your throat. The stones were your only protection now, the only thing keeping whatever was at bay. But you knew that the barrier wouldn't last forever. The stones had been placed here for a reason, perhaps to protect against something far worse than anything you had imagined. And that reason was about to reveal itself. The figure in the mist took another step, and the earth trembled beneath your feet. You could hear the rustle of its movements, slow and deliberate, like it was savoring every moment of your fear. Its presence was oppressive, suffocating, a dark cloud that loomed over you. The growl came again, deep and low, vibrating the very ground you stood on. "You should have never come." You turned, your eyes desperately searching the clearing for a way to escape. The stones loomed around you, their power palpable in the air, but the creature in the mist was drawing closer with every passing second. You were trapped. The boundary was no longer enough to protect you. With a burst of adrenaline, you turned and ran, not toward the woods but toward the stones. You had to make it back to the lodge, to safety, to the warmth of the fire. But the path was gone. The mist had consumed everything, and the trees seemed to move, to shift, as though they were trying to trap you. Your legs burned, your lungs screamed for air, but the ground seemed to pull at you, dragging you down with every step. The figure in the mist was no longer just a shadow. It had formed now, shifting, distorted, like it was made of the very darkness itself. It reached out toward you, its fingers elongated and impossibly long, grasping for you, inching ever closer. A voice, no, a scream rang out, distant yet unmistakably familiar. It sounded like a warning, a plea, or was it a cry for help? You didn't have time to think. You had to run, you had to escape before it was too late. But the forest wasn't going to let you leave. The trees closed in, the ground became more treacherous, and the mist swallowed everything. The only thing you could see was the gleaming, burning eyes of the creature, staring into your soul, just before everything went dark. The world around you had dissolved into chaos. The dark figure in the mist, its eyes burning with an unnatural fire, had closed in, its presence suffocating everything it touched. The forest around you seemed to warp, as if it too were part of the creature's twisted reality, bending and reshaping itself to trap you in its grip. Your breath came in sharp, panicked gasps as you pushed forward, your legs moving on their own, your mind reeling with fear and confusion. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, decay, and something metallic, like iron but richer, more pungent. The ground beneath your feet shifted with every step, pulling at your boots as though the earth itself were hungry, yearning to pull you back into its depths. You stumbled, your foot catching on a root that seemed to emerge from the earth with malicious intent. The forest wasn't just alive, it was aware of you and it didn't want you here. You glanced over your shoulder. The creature had stopped. It loomed in the fog, a shape so massive and dark that it seemed to devour the light itself. Its eyes burned brighter, illuminating the mist like twin lanterns, but they were empty, hollow, soulless. You couldn't escape its gaze no matter how fast you ran. And then the voice came again, deeper now, rumbling from the very heart of the forest. You cannot escape. The word sent a shockwave through your chest, rattling your bones, paralyzing you for a moment. You stopped dead in your tracks, your feet sinking into the soft, wet ground. The trees around you creaked, groaned, their branches twisting and shifting as if they were alive, their boughs reaching out toward you, almost beckoning. The mist closed in tighter, swirling around you so thick you could barely see the path ahead. The fog was no longer just a physical presence. It felt alive. It seemed to wrap itself around your body, 1,000 invisible tendrils tightening around your limbs, suffocating you with each breath. You felt the weight of it all, the forest, the mist, the thing in the distance that watched you with burning eyes. But there was something else now, something far more ancient and terrifying than anything you had encountered so far. The stones that had once provided you with a sense of safety, the boundary that had held the creature back, were no longer enough. You could feel the change in the air, the shift in the balance of power. You were no longer protected. The ground beneath your feet quaked as a low growl resonated through the earth. The trees moaned, their trunks shaking as if they were reacting to something much older. And then, without warning, the mist parted. In the clearing ahead, you saw them, more stones, but these were different. They weren't like the ancient, weathered stones that had formed the circle of protection. These were larger, darker, their surfaces slick and glistening with what looked like ancient runes, etched deeply into the stone. The air around them hummed, not with the same power as before, but with a dark, foreboding energy, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. At the center of the stone stood an altar. It was made of the same dark stone, weathered by time, but more elaborate, with carvings that twisted and spiraled into shapes that you couldn't comprehend. The very sight of it made your head ache, as though something ancient and terrible was sleeping beneath it, waiting for you to awaken it. The creature's presence grew stronger now, closer. You could feel its eyes on you, its unblinking gaze like a burning mark on your skin. And then the whisper started again, soft at first but growing louder, clearer. The voices came from all directions, not human voices, not even animal, but something much older, something that had been here long before you ever set foot in this cursed forest. It has begun. The words felt like a death sentence. Your pulse raced as the ground trembled beneath your feet. The trees groaned louder now, the canopy above creaking as if the very forest was waking up, stretching its limbs after a long, dark slumber. The mist thickened again, wrapping itself around your body, pulling you toward the altar in the center. You are the offering. The words seemed to echo from everywhere, vibrating through the stone beneath you, vibrating through your bones. You couldn't move. The mist, the forest, the altar, it was all coming together, drawing you in, and you were powerless to resist. The creature was almost upon you now, its shadow stretching far across the clearing, its burning eyes fixated on you. You tried to scream, to run, but your voice was lost in the suffocating fog, your legs too weak to carry you. You stumbled forward, drawn to the altar like a moth to a flame. The whispers grew louder, filling your mind, drowning out everything else. You could feel their cold, ancient presence pressing in on you from every direction, their unseen fingers tugging at your soul, urging you toward the stone. Step forward. You could feel the force of it now, pulling you with unnatural strength, the weight of centuries of darkness closing in on you. The forest seemed to be breathing, its every exhale a pulse, a beat, and it was all leading you to this moment, to this altar, to whatever was waiting beneath it. Your heart raced, your pulse thundering in your ears, but you could not stop. The ground was slick with the rain, but you had no choice. You had to follow. When you reached the altar, you felt it, a coldness, a darkness that wrapped itself around your chest like an iron shackle. The runes on the stones flared to life, glowing with an eerie, sickly green light, pulsing in time with the thudding of your heart. The creature was right behind you now. You could feel its breath, hot and foul, on your neck. Its growl was so deep it shook the very air, vibrating in your bones, and you knew, this was it. The forest had claimed you, and now you were part of it. The final step had been taken. You turned to face the creature. Its form was almost fully revealed now, its twisted, grotesque shape standing tall in the mist. Its eyes burned with that unholy fire, and its mouth was wide, too wide, stretching impossibly, full of rows of jagged teeth. It opened its maw, and a horrendous screech echoed through the clearing, a sound that seemed to split the very air. And then, from the darkness behind the altar, a figure emerged. A figure you recognized. The figure emerging from the darkness behind the altar was an unexpected sight. It moved slowly, deliberately, its silhouette shifting against the mist, but it wasn't a beast or shadow. It was human, or at least it resembled one. The moment you saw it, your heart skipped, a surge of recognition flooding your chest. You could feel it even before you fully made sense of who, or what, it was. A woman, tall and gaunt, her skin ashen and drawn tight against her bones, stepped into the sickly green glow of the runes. Her eyes, dark and hollow, glimmered faintly with a cruel gleam as she slowly approached, her movements languid, unnatural. The silence around her seemed to grow deeper, heavier, as if the world itself were holding its breath, waiting for something. You stumbled backward, almost falling to the ground as your mind raced. This woman, this creature, was familiar to you. Her face, though pale and drawn, carried a strange, unsettling resemblance to someone you had seen before. She looked like a reflection, a shadow, someone you might have known, or someone you were supposed to forget. Her lips parted, and in a voice as cold as the earth itself, she spoke, her words like the rustling of dry leaves in the wind. "You've come back." The sound of her voice reverberated through the clearing, the whisper of it coiling around you, threading itself into your thoughts. There was something in her tone, something that made your blood run cold, an unspoken recognition, as if she already knew you, as if you had met before long ago. But you couldn't remember. You shouldn't remember. It's been so long. Her voice broke the silence again, and her eyes, those hollow dead eyes, locked onto yours, sending a cold shiver up your spine. She took another step forward, and you could feel the pressure of the atmosphere around her, as if the air itself had thickened with her presence. The creature behind her, the one whose eyes had burned with that primal hunger, seemed to quiet now, retreating slightly into the mist. But it was still there, its breath a low rumble that vibrated the earth beneath your feet. It was waiting, watching. "You don't remember me, do you?" Her voice was almost wistful, though there was no warmth in it. Only emptiness. "You've forgotten, just like all the others." You took a step back, unable to speak, unable to tear your gaze away from her. The recognition gnawed at you, scratching at the edges of your mind, but the harder you tried to reach it, the further it slipped away. The mist swirled around you again, a thick fog that seemed to press in on your every thought, clouding your mind with memories that didn't belong, memories that you shouldn't have. The woman smiled, a twisted, skeletal grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a smile of pity, of something darker. She was toying with you, drawing you in, slowly unraveling your sense of reality. "You didn't think you could just leave, did you?" Her voice had changed now, becoming sharp, cold, and unforgiving. "You didn't think the forest would let you go so easily, did you?" The words hit you like a physical blow. The forest, the creatures, the darkness, it was all connected. You had walked into something far older than you had realized. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting for you. "You were always meant to return," she continued, her words wrapping around you like chains. "This place, this forest, it calls to those who belong. To those who are chosen. And you, my dear, have always been one of us." The mist seemed to pulse with her words, swirling violently around you, as if the forest itself was alive, listening, responding. The ground trembled beneath your feet as the very earth seemed to open beneath you, the darkness reaching up with invisible hands, eager to drag you down. "I was there at the beginning, watching. I saw it all." Her voice became a whisper now, soft but insistent, like a memory trying to break through the fog. "I saw the way the forest welcomed you, the way it embraced you, just as it has embraced all those before you." A sudden flash of memory hit you, and for the briefest moment you saw it, a clearing in the woods just like this one. The stones, the altar, the mist, and standing there at the center was her, the same woman, the same twisted figure, but you were standing beside her, a younger version of yourself, your eyes wide with something you couldn't place. The vision flickered, fading almost as quickly as it came, leaving you breathless and disoriented. "You were chosen," the woman's voice cut through your confusion, "long before you ever set foot in this cursed forest. You belong here just as we all do. Just as it was always meant to be." Her words twisted around your mind, and a sickening realization began to settle in. The creature behind her, the growl that had once seemed distant, was now much closer. You could hear its breathing, the slow, rhythmic pulse of it. It was patient, like a predator waiting for the right moment. Your mind spun as the truth began to unravel before you. "The forest chose you," she continued, her voice now a rasping whisper. "Not for what you think, but for what you are. This place, it takes those who walk through it. The lost, the desperate, the broken. And once it takes you, there is no escaping." The woman stepped forward again, this time with purpose. Her long, skeletal fingers reached toward you, and the creature moved behind her, its massive form barely visible in the swirling mist. You could feel the weight of their presence now, suffocating, closing in on you from all sides. "We were waiting for you," she said, her voice a slow, deliberate caress that sent shivers through your spine. "We, the ones who belong to this place. You have come back to us, to the true purpose of this forest. And now..." Her hand was nearly upon you, her long fingers outstretched, when the creature behind her lunged, its form emerging from the mist with terrifying speed. The growl was deafening, the sound of its enormous jaws snapping shut filled the air. Everything happened in a blur. You didn't think, you just reacted. You spun, your feet moving faster than your mind could process, and you ran. Not toward the stones, not toward the altar, but deeper into the forest. The mist, the trees, the very ground itself seemed to close in on you, pushing you forward. The creature's growl echoed behind you, low and menacing, but the forest was on your side. The earth, the air, it responded to you now, the trees parting, the path clearing, as though it were guiding you away from the horror. But for how long? For how long could you outrun your past? You ran. Your legs burned with every step, your heart hammering in your chest like the frantic rhythm of a drum. The mist swirled around you, thickening with every passing second, until the world itself seemed to blur into one endless stretch of fog and shadow. The ground beneath your feet felt like it was shifting, the earth itself conspiring against you, pulling you deeper into the forest, away from the clearing, away from the altar. The growl of the creature behind you was unmistakable now, its breath a low, guttural growl that vibrated through your bones. It was gaining on you. You could feel its presence, thick and suffocating, moving just at the edge of your perception. The trees parted briefly, allowing you a glimpse of the path ahead, narrow, dark, and twisted, but a path nonetheless. You pushed yourself harder, your breath coming in ragged gasps, your legs trembling with the effort. But no matter how fast you ran, no matter how hard you tried to escape, the shadow of the creature loomed ever closer. It was patient. It didn't need to hurry, not when it knew that the forest itself would aid in the chase. The ground beneath you suddenly buckled, and you stumbled forward, your hands scraping against the rough bark of a tree to catch yourself. The mist was thicker now, swirling in unnatural patterns as if it were alive, pulsing with the rhythm of your fear. The trees too seemed to be shifting, their trunks twisting and contorting, blocking your path, trapping you. You turned sharply, heart pounding. The creature was close now, its eyes gleaming through the fog like twin fireballs, burning with an intensity that seemed to pierce the very fabric of the mist. You could hear it, the soft shuffle of its feet against the forest floor, the rustling of the underbrush as it moved through the woods with eerie grace. It wasn't just chasing you, it was playing with you. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the trees, causing the branches to sway and groan as if the forest itself were alive. The wind carried a strange, sweet scent, almost like the fragrance of flowers, but there was something about it that made your skin crawl. It was raw. The scent was mingled with the pungent, metallic tang of blood. And then, as you turned yet another corner in the labyrinth of trees, you saw it. A clearing. But not just any clearing, this one was different. The trees surrounding it were twisted, their trunks bent and warped into grotesque shapes. They reached out like skeletal fingers, their gnarled limbs hanging low, as though they were trying to trap anything that entered within. In the center of the clearing was a large pool, dark and still, its surface reflecting nothing but shadows. The water seemed to drink in the surrounding darkness, as though it were a portal to something deeper, something darker. The edges of the pool were lined with thick moss, and strange, pale flowers bloomed around it, their petals curling inward as if hiding some terrible secret. A figure stood at the edge of the pool, cloaked in the same mist that now enveloped the clearing. It was tall, unnaturally tall, its outline flickering in and out of existence like a shadow struggling to retain its form. You froze. The figure turned toward you, and you saw its eyes, those hollow, endless black eyes, the same eyes you had seen before, but this time they seemed deeper, as though they had absorbed the very essence of the forest. The growl of the creature behind you intensified, and the ground beneath your feet began to tremble. You realized with a sickening feeling that the figure at the pool was not just standing there. It was waiting for you to cross the threshold, to step into the clearing, where it could ensnare you with its terrible power. The air grew thick, almost viscous, as if it were choking you. Every breath you took felt like it was clogged with smoke, or perhaps the very essence of the forest itself. The trees around the clearing began to bend closer, their branches wrapping around the edges of the pool, as if drawing you into their web. Suddenly, the creature behind you leapt. A flash of movement, a blur of shadows and teeth, and the world seemed to slow as you turned to face it, your pulse quickening, your breath a jagged gasp. It moved too quickly, too unnaturally fast, but you didn't have time to think. You had to move. With a desperate lunge, you sprinted toward the pool, your heart pounding in your ears, your legs screaming for relief. The creature's growl echoed in the clearing as it pounded toward you, its claws scraping against the earth, its breath hot on your back. Just as you reached the edge of the pool, you threw yourself forward, your arms outstretched toward the water. You didn't know what you expected to happen, whether it was the water's surface to give way or some force to pull you in, but you didn't care. You were desperate. The creature was behind you, and the only choice left was to either face it head-on or let the forest take you. But the moment your fingers brushed the surface of the water, the clearing seemed to stop moving. The world froze. The mist parted briefly, the trees standing still like sentinels, their twisted forms now frozen in place. The creature stopped in mid-motion, its jaws snapping, but it was no longer a threat. The eerie howl of the wind ceased, and even the very air seemed to hold its breath. Then came a whisper, a soft, almost imperceptible sound that flowed through your mind like a river. You are at the edge. The voice was neither male nor female, but something other. Something ancient and vast, like the very forest itself speaking. You felt the weight of it, the power behind the words. You are at the edge. It was a warning, but it was also a choice. You knew then what this place was. This was no mere forest. This was a crossroads, a place of transition. A place where the living and the dead, the real and the imagined, met. A place where choices were made. The forest had taken others like you, others who had wandered in, lost and desperate, seeking escape or salvation. And now it was your turn. The figure by the pool began to move again, its form flickering in and out of existence like the shifting shapes of smoke. It took a step forward, and with it, the mist seemed to part, revealing a path, the only path, leading deeper into the forest. It was the same path the creature had been guarding, the same path that had brought you here. You had no choice. The forest had already claimed you. The air was heavy with anticipation. Every muscle in your body screamed for relief, for escape, but there was no way out. The trees, the mist, the oppressive weight of the forest, it all pressed in on you, closing in from every direction. The clearing, with its strange pool and the figure standing by its edge, had become a threshold, a doorway. But to where? And what awaited you beyond? The figure before you, the one you had recognized but could not place, shifted again. It wasn't human. It wasn't even entirely alive. Its presence was a strange amalgamation of shadow and substance, its form flickering like a half-remembered nightmare, constantly changing, constantly in flux. The eyes, those hollow, endless black eyes, locked onto yours, their gaze pulling you deeper into the void. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out, just a low, whispering hum that seemed to vibrate the very air around you. You are not the first, the voice said, and this time it was clearer, colder, like it came from the depths of the earth itself. It was a voice that seemed to belong to the forest, to the stones, to the trees. It was a voice older than time. And you will not be the last. Your pulse quickened. What was it saying? What did it mean? The creature behind you, still lurking just beyond the edge of your sight, its low growl vibrating in the air, seemed to be growing more restless, as if it could feel the same shift in the atmosphere. But you couldn't focus on it now. The figure in front of you held your attention, its eyes drawing you in with an unnatural gravity. This is the path of the lost, it continued, its voice now a low murmur, almost as if speaking directly into your mind. Once you take this step, there is no turning back. This forest is not just a place. It is a memory. It is a punishment. And it will remember you. You tried to speak, but the words caught in your throat. What could you say? How could you ask what was happening? How could you make sense of any of this? The figure stepped closer, and as it did, the mist parted around it, revealing the path behind it more clearly now. It wasn't a path through trees anymore, but something different. Something darker, twisted, unnatural. It was a tunnel of trees, but the trees themselves looked wrong. Their trunks were jagged, their limbs contorted into unnatural shapes, their bark warped and scarred. The path itself was covered in thick black vines that pulsed and writhed as though alive. Behind you, the growl of the creature grew louder, closer. It was drawing near, but its presence seemed distant now, fading as though it were no longer interested in the hunt. Whatever was waiting for you at the end of this path was far more important. The figure's face, if you could call it that, tilted slightly as if studying you, waiting for you to make a choice. It didn't need to speak. Its presence alone conveyed the gravity of the decision you were about to make. Follow the path, it whispered, its voice sending a chill through your spine. Or face what comes for you. The wind howled around you, causing the trees to sway and creak. You could feel the pull of the path, the way it seemed to beckon you, urging you to step forward, to give in. The forest wanted you. It had always wanted you. There was no denying it now. The whispers that had followed you, the strange pull you had felt the moment you entered the woods, it had all been leading to this. You glanced behind you at the creature still lurking in the mist. It was large, its form barely visible, but its eyes, those burning eyes, were fixed on you. It was waiting for you to choose. What was this creature? What did it want from you? You cannot outrun what is already inside you. The figure spoke again, its voice softer now, but somehow more insistent. This forest doesn't just hunt the body. It hunts the soul. It knows you. Your heart slammed against your ribcage. You couldn't outrun it. You couldn't escape. But what would happen if you followed the path? What would be waiting for you on the other side? The pull was unbearable. The path, though dark and twisted, seemed like the only way forward. You had no choice but to walk it. The forest was the only thing that would allow you to survive. Taking a shaky breath, you turned and began to walk, your feet moving automatically, the forest guiding you forward. The mist swirled tighter around you, the trees bending closer, their gnarled limbs brushing against your shoulders. The air grew thicker, colder, the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves mixing with something foul, something wrong. The path twisted ahead, narrowing into an even darker corridor. The vines on the ground seemed to writhe with each step you took, as if they were reaching up to drag you back into the depths of the earth. The trees seemed to close in, blocking out the sky entirely. It was as though you had entered a different world, a place outside time and space. The very air felt unnatural. Every step you took felt like it was leading you deeper into the forest's heart, into its waiting jaws. The figure was behind you now, a shadow that never seemed to leave your side, always just out of sight, yet somehow always with you. And then there was a sound, a distant sound, faint at first but growing louder. The sound of something moving through the trees. Something large. Something that didn't belong. You turned quickly, your heart racing, but there was nothing. Just the mist and the trees. But the sound persisted. It was getting closer, closing in. The path before you twisted again, this time narrowing to a single jagged line between two massive ancient trees. The bark on them was dark, covered in strange symbols that pulsed with the same sickly green glow as the stones in the clearing. And then you saw it, the end of the path. The trees opened up to reveal an altar, a massive stone structure like the one you had seen before but much larger. The symbols on it were older, etched deeply into the stone, and they shimmered in the mist. The atmosphere around the altar was charged as though it were a gateway, a point of no return. But before you could take another step, the growl behind you returned, louder, more distinct. It wasn't just a creature anymore. It was a force, a presence. The sound of something ancient and hungry, something that had waited for eons to be unleashed. You stood at the edge now, the altar looming before you, the creature closing in behind. The forest was waiting. The forest was hungry. The path had been set before you, and there was no turning back. You were at the threshold. You stood at the edge of the altar, your breath shallow, your heart thumping against your ribcage like a prisoner desperate to escape. The ground beneath you felt cold and unforgiving, the dark stone of the altar staring back at you like the unblinking eyes of a predator. The forest had swallowed you whole, and now it was offering you a choice that seemed more like a command. Step forward, face what awaited, and become part of it. Behind you, the creature's growl reverberated through the air, deep and guttural, vibrating the very ground beneath your feet. It was getting closer, and the sound of its movements grew louder, quicker, as if it were drawing closer with every heartbeat. You could feel its breath now, hot and foul, seeping through the mist, its presence heavy and suffocating. But the creature was not your only concern. The altar, the stone that stood before you, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its strange symbols glowing faintly in the fog, whispering in a language older than the forest itself. The path behind you was already lost. You had crossed into the heart of this place, and there was no turning back. Every step you had taken since you first set foot in the forest had led you here, to this moment. You could feel it now, the weight of the forest pressing on your soul, pulling you into its embrace. The altar seemed to call to you, an invisible force tugging at the deepest part of your being. The symbols etched into the stone, dark and intricate, hummed with an ancient power, resonating in the air like the vibrations of a distant, forgotten song. The mist around it thickened, swirling and curling like tendrils, wrapping themselves around the stone and then fading into the trees, as though the very essence of the forest was connected to it. And there, at the base of the altar, were the remnants of what had once been offerings, dried flowers, bones, twisted fragments of objects, some of which were unrecognizable. There was an unnaturalness to them, as if the forest itself had claimed them, consumed them, making them part of its dark, cyclical existence. A voice, soft and rasping, echoed in your mind, but it was not from the creature. It was from the forest itself, from the very stones beneath your feet. Come closer. You are expected. The voice wasn't human, wasn't even animal. It was primal, a whisper that seemed to vibrate in the marrow of your bones, a low hum that reverberated through your entire body. You could feel it, the call to step forward, to touch the altar, to give yourself over to whatever ancient force resided here. Your legs felt heavy, as if the forest itself was holding you in place, keeping you there. But the pull of the altar, the power radiating from it, was irresistible. You couldn't ignore it, no matter how desperately you tried. Your feet began to move of their own accord, as if guided by some unseen hand. The creature behind you gave another low growl, a warning. It was still there, still waiting, but you knew that it was not the true threat. The creature, whatever it was only a shadow of something far more terrifying, something that had been waiting for you, for all of you, for centuries. You took a step forward, then another. Each movement felt heavier, as if the very air had thickened around you, pressing down on you from all sides. The mist curled at your feet, wrapping around your ankles like tendrils of some dark plant, trying to hold you in place. But you moved forward, one step at a time, until you were standing before the altar. The symbols on the stone were now glowing more brightly, their light pulsating in time with your heartbeat. You could feel the energy radiating from them, a power that seemed to hum with life, with a hunger. It was a force so old, so ancient, that it made your skin crawl just being near it. The air felt thick with it, suffocating, as though the very atmosphere around you was charged with something unnatural. The forest seemed to breathe with you, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. You could hear the wind in the trees, but it wasn't the same wind as before. It was no longer the gentle rustle of leaves. It was something deeper, darker, a howling wail that carried the voices of those who had come before you. The forest had claimed them just as it was now claiming you. You are the offering, the voice whispered again, but this time it was clearer, sharper. You are the one who will return what was taken, what was lost. Your heart skipped in your chest. What had been taken? What had been lost? You felt a cold hand, a presence at the back of your mind, like a shadow moving within your thoughts, pulling at the fragments of memories you could not reach. Images flashed before your eyes. The stone circle, the mist, the creatures, the strange pull that had led you into the forest in the first place. But there was something more. Something beyond the fog, beyond the creatures, beyond the whispers. You were not the first to be chosen. You were just another in a long line of lost souls, drawn into this place, taken by its power, and forced to play your part in the ancient cycle that governed this cursed land. The mist began to coalesce again, thickening around the altar, its presence growing stronger. The figure from before, the one who had appeared by the pool, was there again, standing just beyond the edge of your vision, its shadow flickering in and out of the fog. Its eyes, those deep black eyes, watched you, waiting. The creature's growl rumbled behind you once more, but it wasn't the same growl as before. It was deeper, more resonant, a sound that seemed to shake the very air. The forest itself seemed to be drawing closer, pulling you toward the altar, toward the heart of its dark power. Step forward, the voice urged once more. You are the one who must complete the ritual. The blood must be spilled. The offering must be made. The moment the words left the figure's lips, the altar seemed to pulse with energy, and the symbols etched into its surface flared brightly. A cold, sharp pain shot through your chest, and for a moment, you thought you would collapse from the intensity of it. You gasped for air, clutching at your side, but there was no wound, nothing visible, yet the pain was real, as if something inside you was being torn apart. And then it happened. A dark shadow rose from the ground, from the very heart of the altar, curling upward like a twisted, serpentine form. It was a presence, dark and shifting, that grew and expanded, its tendrils reaching toward you. The very ground beneath you seemed to give way, and you stumbled forward, almost falling into the altar. The shadow was closing in on you, wrapping itself around you, and you felt it. The hunger. The forest was hungry. The altar was hungry. And you were the offering. The final piece to complete the ritual, to feed the ancient hunger that had plagued the woods for eons. Your body trembled, the shadows curling tighter around you, but a part of you knew. This was it. There was no turning back. You were bound to this place now, bound to the ancient forces that had awakened with your arrival. The mist was thick now, almost suffocating. The voices of the forest were louder, blending into a cacophony of whispers, cries, and dark laughter. The growl of the creature behind you was drowned out by the growing roar of the forest's hunger. And then, without warning, the shadow lunged and everything went dark. The world faded into darkness, and for a moment you were lost. Lost in the deep, endless blackness that seemed to stretch on forever, swallowing you whole. The air had become thick, suffocating, and yet you couldn't breathe. Your chest constricted with each passing second, as if something was pushing against your ribs, trying to crush you from the inside out. But then a flicker, a pulse of light, pierced the darkness. It was faint at first, like the dim glow of a distant star, but it grew stronger, pulling you toward it, drawing you out of the void. The mist. You could feel it again, the familiar dampness clinging to your skin, the chill that seeped into your bones. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling around you like 1,000 voices, some of them soft, others sharp and insistent. They were close, and yet they seemed far away, echoing from all directions. "You are ours now," the voice from the altar echoed through your mind, cutting through the haze. It was a deep, resonant sound, a voice that carried the weight of centuries within it. It was not just one voice, but a multitude, layered over each other, each one speaking with the same unrelenting force. The ritual must be completed. Your soul will fuel the forest. You gasped, sucking in air as your vision began to clear, the darkness fading like fog at sunrise. But when you opened your eyes, you realized you were no longer in the clearing, no longer standing at the altar. The world around you had changed. The trees, the mist, everything was different now. The air was heavier, charged with an unnatural energy, and the forest, once familiar, had turned into something far darker. The trees towered over you, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching down like skeletal hands clawing at the sky. The mist had grown thick, swirling around your feet and rising up to your waist, forming tendrils that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. The ground was soft, spongy like wet moss, but it pulsed beneath you, alive with a strange, unsettling rhythm. You felt the pull again, the force that had been guiding you this entire time, drawing you deeper into the heart of the forest. It was not the creature's growl you heard now, nor the voices that had whispered in your ears. It was something far worse. Something ancient and hungry, something that had been waiting for you to complete your journey, to arrive at this point, at this moment, in this place. The offering must be made, the voice whispered again, its tone now tinged with anticipation, as though it could sense your hesitation. Blood must be spilled. A life for a life. You couldn't move. The words were like chains binding you in place. The weight of them pressed down on your shoulders, pushing you further into the ground, until you felt your knees buckle beneath you. You wanted to scream, to run, but your body refused to obey. You were trapped. The mist swirled tighter, the tendrils wrapping around your legs, pulling you toward the center of the forest. The altar, the one you had seen before, was now in front of you again. But it was different this time. The stone was darker, slick with something that resembled oil, reflecting the pale light that seemed to pour from nowhere. The symbols etched into its surface were no longer faint and glowing. They were now alive, pulsing with a sickly green light, shifting and writhing as though they were part of the forest itself, a living, breathing entity. Atop the altar was a bowl, dark and empty, its surface gleaming in the eerie light. It seemed to beckon you, its presence a call to the very marrow of your bones. And then you saw it, the thing that had been waiting. The creature, no longer a shadow or a growl, but fully formed, stepping out of the mist, its massive shape emerging like a nightmare-made flesh. It was more than just a beast. It was a force, a presence that seemed to absorb the very light around it, its form shifting and writhing as if it were not bound by the laws of reality. It had the shape of a wolf, but its features were twisted, monstrous, its body a dark mass of fur, shadow, and jagged, cruel limbs. Its eyes, those burning, soulless eyes, pierced through the fog, locking onto you with a hunger that made your skin crawl. Its growl, low and rumbling, echoed in your chest, vibrating through your bones, and you could feel it, that ancient, unyielding desire in its gaze. It wasn't just hunger, it was need. A need that had spanned centuries, a hunger that had never been sated. And you were the offering. The creature moved closer, its massive form shifting with unnatural fluidity, its claws scraping the stone with a sound that sent a chill down your spine. Its breath was hot and foul, and you could hear it, the soft whispers in the mist, voices that seemed to be urging the creature on, urging it toward you. The offering must be made, the voice echoed, growing louder, more insistent. You are the one. You are the key. The creature's gaze never wavered, and you felt yourself being pulled toward it, toward the altar. The air around you thickened, charged with dark energy, and for the first time, you understood the true nature of this place. The forest was not just alive, it was sentient. It was a living, breathing entity that fed on the souls of the lost. It was a prison, a trap, and you had fallen into it. The creature reached the altar, its massive paws scraping against the stone as it loomed over you. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth, its breath hot against your skin. And then it spoke. Blood must be spilled. The words hit you like a physical blow, a shockwave that rattled your body. Your vision blurred, your mind screaming in protest, but your body moved on its own. You were drawn to the altar as if your very soul was bound to it. The forest's hunger, the creature's hunger, was too strong. The pull was overwhelming. The altar's bowl glowed brighter now, its surface shimmering with a dark energy. You could feel it deep inside, a sickening warmth that spread from the pit of your stomach to your chest, to your throat. The forest wanted your blood, and it would take it one way or another. You reached out, trembling, and touched the bowl. The moment your fingers brushed against its surface, a surge of cold energy shot through you, a bolt of power that burned through your veins, coursing through your very soul. The creature snarled, its eyes widening as if it recognized the moment. And then the bowl began to fill. Not with water, not with any physical substance, but with something far worse. The shadows, the dark mist that swirled around you began to coalesce, swirling faster and faster until they took shape. You could feel it, the energy being drawn from you, from your very being, as if your essence was being siphoned away. The forest had claimed you, and it was feeding. The moment your fingers touched the cold surface of the bowl, the entire forest seemed to shudder. The mist around you thickened, swirling in violent spirals, drawing the shadows into the stone like a torrent, as if the altar itself were drinking in the dark, pulling it into the deep void of its center. The strange, sickly green glow of the symbols flickered wildly, their light intensifying until it burned, searing your vision, casting twisted shadows across the trees that bent and groaned under the weight of the energy filling the air. You could feel it, that gnawing, suffocating pressure, the force of the forest's will, its ancient hunger sinking into your chest, into your very soul. The blood in your veins turned cold, as though the forest was reaching deep inside you, searching for something. Something important. Something it needed. The growl of the creature behind you, low and resonant, vibrated through the ground beneath your feet, sending a tremor through your body. Its massive form stood over you now, its breath hot and foul, the scent of decay and death hanging thick in the air. But it wasn't the creature itself that held your attention anymore. No, it was the altar, the pulsating, living altar, that commanded your every thought. Your hand trembled against the bowl as the shadows around you began to shift. They moved like liquid, flowing from the mist, flowing into the stone, growing, multiplying. The symbols etched into the altar came to life, their patterns shifting and twisting in ways that defied logic, as if they were rewriting themselves, drawing power from a source deeper than the earth itself. This is the moment, the voice of the forest whispered again, now echoing in your mind, each word like a command. The blood must be spilled. You wanted to fight, wanted to scream, to pull away, but your body refused to obey. The shadows began to twist around you, their tendrils wrapping tighter, holding you in place, their grip like cold iron. You couldn't breathe. You couldn't move. You were a prisoner of the forest, a puppet to its will. The creature growled again, louder now, its form casting long shadows on the ground as it circled the altar, its eyes never leaving you. It was waiting for the offering. The air around you began to crackle with energy, a low hum building from the depths of the earth. The very atmosphere seemed to vibrate, the forest itself holding its breath as the shadows fed into the bowl, swirling faster, until they began to take shape. A dark, writhing mass, a twisting vortex of darkness, materialized above the bowl, shifting, pulsing with a life of its own. It begins, the voice said again, a low, guttural hum that reverberated through the ground and into your bones. The shadow above the bowl began to form a shape, a figure that was familiar and yet unrecognizable. You could feel it. This thing was not of this world. It was not human nor beast. It was something ancient, something forgotten, something that had been trapped in the depths of the earth, waiting for the blood that would free it. Your vision blurred as the shadow began to solidify, its shape flickering like a flame caught in the wind. It was tall, too tall, its limbs elongated and twisted in unnatural angles, its body a dark, fluid mass that seemed to melt in and out of shape. The figure's face, if it could even be called that, was a blank void, an abyss of darkness, but within it, you could sense the eyes, the terrible, burning eyes of something ancient and hungry. They were there, even though you couldn't see them, lurking behind the mask of shadow. The air around you crackled with the weight of the ritual. The ground beneath your feet began to tremble, and you could feel it. The forest shifting, the trees groaning in agony as they were forced to witness what was happening. The creature behind you, the wolf-like monster, stepped forward, its breath a searing heat against your neck, its massive jaws snapping hungrily in your direction. It was waiting. It wasn't the creature that you feared. It was the thing being born from the altar. The one that would rise from the shadows and feast. The offering must be made, the voice intoned again, its words now a thick, heavy weight pressing against your chest. You will fuel the return. You could feel the pull now, a sickening tug at the center of your being. Your blood, your soul, they were the price. And the forest would claim both. Your body moved of its own accord, your hands still pressing against the bowl, even as the darkness swirled higher, feeding, growing, taking on shape, taking on power. The shadows had begun to pour into you, through you, the dark energy leaking into your veins, flooding your body with a terrible burning cold that felt like ice and fire all at once. This is your purpose. The voice echoed through your mind as though it were inside you, as though it were you. You are the key to the return of what was lost. The figure, the shadow, now loomed above you, its form fully emerged, though still a swirling mass of darkness and impossible geometry. Its presence pressed down on you, suffocating, filling every corner of your mind, drowning you in the weight of its hunger. It was ancient, but it was not dead. It was waiting. And then you understood. This place, the forest, the altar, the creatures, they were all part of a cycle, an endless loop of death and rebirth. The forest fed on the lost, on those who wandered into its depths. And it had chosen you to complete the ritual, to bring it all back, to bring the thing that had been sealed away for centuries into the world once more. Your blood, your soul would be the key. The darkness above you began to shift again, its form taking shape, a tall, shadowy figure, the silhouette of something monstrous, yet too alien to be called anything human. The creature's eyes, those burning, empty eyes, flared to life within the darkness. And in that moment you knew. You felt it deep in your chest. It was alive. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the forest, the figure lunged forward, the darkness consuming everything in its path, and you were the vessel. You were the offering. The air crackled with energy as the figure reached down, its long clawed hands grasping at the space around you, pulling the essence of the ritual into its grasp. And then, in a blur, the world exploded in darkness. The moment the darkness consumed you, the world exploded into chaos. A sound, low like thunder but felt in your very bones, reverberated through the entire forest, shaking the ground, the trees, the very air. The mist around you, once soft and swirling, now raged violently, whipping around you in vicious torrents as though it were alive, tearing at the fabric of the world itself. You couldn't breathe. You couldn't move. The weight of the figure, the thing, was pressing down on you, its presence suffocating, its eyes burning like twin suns, searing through the fog and into your very soul. Its touch was like ice and fire, ripping through your chest, freezing your veins and burning your heart in the same breath. And then, just as quickly as it had all begun, everything fell silent. The world came to a halt. The thundering tremors, the swirling mist, the oppressive weight of the forest, all of it stopped, as though the air itself had paused in recognition of something terrible, something ancient. You were suspended in a space between moments, caught in the vacuum of eternity, where time no longer made sense. It felt like you were floating, weightless, untethered to the earth. The ground, the trees, the altar, all of it seemed to dissolve into shadow, and you were left in a void, alone and exposed, a single thread dangling in the dark. The shadows that had once seemed to cling to the edges of your vision now stretched and twisted, moving independently of the world around them, pulling at the very fabric of reality itself. And then you saw it. The thing that had been born from the altar, the figure that had risen from the shadows, was now standing before you, its form massive, towering, its presence filling the void like a storm cloud. It was no longer just an abstract shape, a flickering silhouette. Now it had substance, and that substance was horrifying. Its body was like a twisted amalgamation of the forest itself. Its limbs were long, impossibly so, made of bark and shadow, shifting and breaking into branches that seemed to reach out for you with every movement. The eyes, those unblinking, infinite eyes, burned with an unnatural light, piercing through the darkness like a blade cutting into you. Its mouth, a wide, gaping maw of impossibly sharp teeth, stretched too far to be natural, as if the very concept of a mouth had been distorted and stretched into something grotesque. It was not just an animal. It was beyond that, a being born from the very fabric of the forest, a creature of the earth and shadow, its existence tied to the ancient cycle of life and death, growth and decay. You could feel it then, the hunger. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something primal, an endless craving that had consumed this creature for eons. It was not just hunger for flesh, but hunger for essence. It fed on the souls of the lost, of those who wandered into the depths of the forest, drawn by the whispering call that had brought you here. It fed on the life force, on the very essence of the living, until nothing remained but husks. And now it had you. The air around you thickened, pulling you closer to the creature, drawing you into its sphere, its influence. You could feel its power, the weight of it, pulling at your chest, your heart, like a tether that had connected you to the very soul of the forest. "You are the key," the voice echoed, but now it was no longer a whisper. It was a deep, resonant sound like the rumble of the earth itself. "The forest has waited for you. The cycle is complete." You wanted to scream, to fight, but your body was no longer your own. The shadows were around you now, binding you, pulling you closer to the figure, to the thing that had been born of darkness and hunger. The earth beneath you shifted again, and you felt a pull, a dreadful pull, as though the very ground was trying to consume you, to drag you deeper into its core. "The offering has been made," the voice continued, resonating in your chest, vibrating through every fiber of your being. "You are the one who will complete the return. The forest will live again." And then, in a moment of clarity, an awful, terrible clarity, you understood. You were not just the offering. You were the vessel. The forest had chosen you from the moment you stepped into its domain. You had been lured here by the whispers, the calling, the ancient pull that had drawn countless others before you. You were the sacrifice, but more than that, you were the key to unlocking the return of something far more ancient than the forest itself. The thing that stood before you, now fully formed and filled with hunger, was not simply a creature of flesh and bone. It was the essence of the forest's will, a manifestation of its power, and you, your very being, was needed to awaken it fully. The altar, the ritual, it had been part of the cycle. The sacrifice, the blood, the offering, it was all necessary. The forest needed you to complete the process, to fuel the beast, to bind your soul to the earth itself. And as you stood there, your body trembling with the force of it all, you realized the terrible truth. The forest would never release you. It couldn't. You were now part of it, just as the others before you had been. You had become part of the cycle, the endless loop of death and rebirth, where the forest consumed and renewed itself in an unending cycle of hunger. The figure took a step closer, its form shifting as if it were part of the very darkness, part of the earth itself. The air grew thick, colder now, like the chill of death itself. You could hear it, the wind, the whispers of the trees, the mournful cries of the lost souls who had been consumed by this place. But it was too late. The ritual was complete. The creature reached out, its claws long and cruel, as sharp as the twisted branches of the trees. Its eyes locked onto yours, those black, endless voids, pulling you in, drowning you in their darkness. "The cycle is complete," it whispered one final time, its voice echoing in the vast emptiness that had consumed your mind. "And you are the forest's." As its claws wrapped around you, you felt your soul being pulled away, being consumed by the forest, by the darkness, by the ancient power that had lived for so long. The last thing you heard was the voice of the forest, and it was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. As the creature's claws wrapped around you, you felt a wave of cold energy crash through your body, a force unlike anything you'd ever experienced. It was as if the very essence of the earth itself had sunk its talons into your soul, pulling you deeper, dragging you into the heart of the forest. You were no longer just a visitor here. You had become part of its very fabric. Every tree, every shadow, every breath of wind now felt like it belonged to you. Your soul was intertwined with the land, and in that moment, you realized just how deep the forest's roots reached. The claws that gripped you were sharp, jagged, yet not entirely solid, like the embodiment of the forest itself, formed from bark and shadow, pulsating with an ancient life. The pressure on your chest grew as it dragged you toward the ground, but the earth was no longer cold or hard. It was alive. It seemed to ripple, breathing in time with the rhythm of the forest's heart. The creature's eyes, those endless voids, loomed before you, staring into your very being, seeing you for what you truly were now, a part of the forest. You no longer had a place in the world beyond. You were here. You had always been here, in the whispers of the trees, in the shadows that clung to the night. The forest had chosen you, just as it had chosen countless others before you. And now, you were the vessel that would carry its will into the world. The ground beneath you seemed to shift, the soil quaking in a slow, rhythmic pulse, as if the earth itself was awakening. The tendrils of mist that swirled around your feet had grown stronger, reaching up toward you like hungry fingers. They wrapped around your legs, pulling at your very flesh, their cold touch sinking into your skin, and for a moment, you thought you could hear the soft murmurs of voices, of the lost souls that had been claimed by this place. "You are the heart now," the creature whispered, its voice deep, guttural, and filled with hunger. "You are the beating pulse of the forest. You are its eternal breath, its endless hunger." The weight of those words sank into your chest, and for a fleeting moment, You could almost feel the heartbeat of the forest thrumming through your veins. It was slow at first, the steady pulse of life and death. The cycle, eternal and unyielding, began to wash over you. You could hear the whisper of leaves in the wind, the crackling of branches twisting in the night air. You could hear the forest, its ancient voice speaking to you through the trees, through the very earth beneath you. It was alive, sentient, hungry, and it had waited for you to complete its cycle. With a final, crushing pull, the creature's claws tightened, and you were slammed to the ground. The earth beneath you shifted again, and this time, the roots themselves seemed to stir, as if the forest were waking from a long slumber, stretching its limbs after centuries of stillness. The ground cracked open, revealing dark, gnarled roots that twisted like veins beneath the earth. They snaked toward you, brushing against your skin, their touch both sharp and gentle, like the caress of something alive, something ancient. The mist swirled around you, thickening and darkening until you could barely see. But through the haze you caught sight of something else. A figure stepping out from the shadows, tall and lean, its face obscured by the darkness, but its presence unmistakable. It was the figure, the one who had stood by the pool, the one who had whispered to you in your mind. Its eyes, pale and empty, glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting the faint green light of the altar, as if it were bound to the forest's power. "It is done," the figure said, its voice a low, haunting whisper that seemed to cut through the fog. "You are now the forest. You have become part of the cycle, the eternal cycle of growth and decay, of life and death." You wanted to scream, to fight back, but your body was no longer your own. You could feel the forest flowing through you, its ancient power thrumming beneath your skin. You could feel it all, the memories of the lost souls, the echoes of those who had wandered into this place before you, their fates sealed by the same ritual. Their voices were mingling with your own, their whispers a chorus of agony and longing. They were now part of you, part of the forest, just as you had become part of it. But there was something else, something more. A terrible sensation filled your chest, and you realized that the forest wasn't just consuming you, it was changing you. Your body was no longer your own. The bones, the flesh, everything inside you seemed to be shifting, reshaping, becoming something else, something other. You could feel it in the air, the pull of the forest, its ancient magic sinking into your flesh, into your very soul. The trees, the mist, the earth, they were all calling to you now, wrapping you in their embrace, making you a part of their eternal cycle. The hunger of the forest was now your hunger. The cycle of death and rebirth that had claimed so many before you was now yours to carry. The roots of the earth seemed to pulse with life, extending outward, wrapping around your body like a cocoon. You felt your heart race, your chest tightening as the roots sank deeper into your skin. And with that final, unbearable pressure, something inside you snapped. The pain was unbearable. The roots twisted deeper into your flesh, pulling at your very essence, and you felt the last remnants of your humanity begin to slip away, as if it were being drained from you. Your vision blurred, your breath shallow, your body no longer your own, as the forest's power consumed you entirely. The air grew colder, the mist thicker. The figure, no longer a mere shadow, stepped forward, its hand outstretched. The creature behind you, the wolf-like beast, growled low, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the very ground beneath you. But now there was no fear. The fear had faded, replaced by something else, a strange, unnatural calm. You were no longer afraid. You belonged here. You were the forest. And as the roots sank deep into your body, as the darkness and the power of the forest wrapped around you like an inescapable cage, you understood the truth. The forest had always been waiting, had always known you. And now you would feed it, just as the others had before you. Your body trembled as the final transformation began. The last breath of humanity you once had slipped away like a dream, vanishing into the mists, swallowed by the ancient hunger of the forest. Your senses sharpened, your sight changing, your very perception of the world bending to the will of the forest. The hunger within you began to burn. And then the cycle began again. As your body twisted and reshaped, the boundaries of your identity began to fade. The forest's power consumed you slowly, methodically, as if it were savoring the transition. The roots burrowed deeper into your skin, their touch both painful and soothing, like a mother's grip and a predator's fangs intertwined. Each root, each tendril, seemed to draw more of you into its embrace, pulling you deeper into the earth, deeper into the very heart of the forest. But it wasn't just your body that was changing. The soul, your soul, was also being rewritten. Memories, fragments of who you had once been, flickered like dying embers in the recesses of your mind. Faces, names, moments from your life, they were slipping away, fading into the dark mist that now enveloped you. It felt like drowning in a pool of shadows, every breath filled with the thick, suffocating weight of the forest's will. The sensation was maddening, being both fully aware and entirely unaware at the same time. You could feel the forest's hunger, its insatiable need to feed, to replenish itself, to grow and spread and reclaim the world it had lost. And now you were its vessel, its tool, its new heart. The creature, the wolf-like beast that had once hunted you, was now standing beside you, its eyes glowing with an eerie satisfaction. It wasn't just a beast anymore. No, it was something more, something tied to the very essence of the forest. It was a manifestation of its power, a guardian, a harbinger of the ancient cycle that had consumed all who had dared to wander too deep. "You are the forest now," the figure, the one who had first spoken to you, said, its voice low and reverberating in your mind. "You are the soul that will guide the harvest." The word sent a shockwave through your consciousness, and for a moment, you struggled against the tide of transformation, against the pull of the forest's will. But it was futile. You could no longer remember what it was like to fight, to resist. The struggle felt like a distant memory, like the fading echo of a dream long forgotten. The forest had already begun its work. Its roots were deep within you, and you were part of its cycle now. The figure stepped forward, its face still obscured by shadow, but you could feel its presence in every fiber of your being. It was ancient, older than anything you had ever known, a being that existed before time, before the first tree sprouted from the earth. Its eyes glowed with an unholy light, a reflection of the hunger that drove the forest forward. And now, its gaze was on you as if it were assessing you, judging your transformation. "The harvest will begin," it said. "The forest must grow. The cycle must continue. You will gather the souls of the lost, those who wander too far, and feed them to the earth. You will be its hands, its voice. You will guide them to their end." A cold shiver ran through your body as its words sank in. The harvest. You were to become a collector of souls. Those poor, lost souls who had come to the forest just as you had, drawn in by the whispers, by the promises of solace or escape. Now their fates would be sealed, and you would be the one to guide them into the forest's waiting maw. The earth beneath you trembled, and the mist began to swirl again, thicker this time, darker. The trees groaned, their ancient limbs creaking as if they were alive, and the wind, now sharp and biting, cut through the still air. It was the beginning, the first sign of the harvest. The figure raised a hand, and in that moment, you could feel the pull of the forest intensify. The earth shuddered with life, and the mist began to take shape, growing thicker, more tangible. It moved toward you, curling around your body, binding you to the forest even tighter. You could feel the eyes of the creatures, the ones who had been claimed long ago, on you, their silent presence surrounding you in the shadows, waiting. The forest breathed. And then it happened. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, lost souls, their forms flickering in and out of the mist. They were just like you had once been, confused, afraid, and drawn to this place by forces they didn't understand. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. They were the ones who had wandered too far, who had been lured into the forest's depths, just as you had. But now they were yours to guide, yours to feed to the earth. As they stumbled forward, their feet dragging through the thick, wet soil, you could feel their fear, their desperation. They sensed the danger, but they didn't know what they were walking into. They couldn't see the forest for what it truly was. And now they were trapped, just like you had been. The creature beside you growled softly, its massive form shifting, ready to pounce. But the figure, the one who had spoken to you, held up a hand, stopping it. No, the voice was sharp, commanding. They must walk the path. The mist parted before you, and a path appeared in the earth, winding through the forest, disappearing into the darkness beyond. It was the path of the harvest, the path that the lost souls would walk unknowingly to their end. You were its keeper now. You were its guide. The first soul, a young man, stepped hesitantly onto the path. His eyes were wide with terror, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He looked up at you, his face a mixture of confusion and desperation. "Help me," he whispered, his voice trembling with fear. But there was nothing you could do for him. You were the forest now. You were its heart, its hunger, its will. And you knew deep within you that he had already been claimed. His soul had already been marked. You raised a hand, motioning for him to continue down the path. The roots beneath the earth trembled in response, shifting and writhing as if they were eager for their next meal. The young man's eyes flickered with hesitation, but he stepped forward. With every step, the darkness around him grew thicker, the air colder, until the path ahead was completely shrouded in mist. You could see the figure of the beast just beyond the fog, its eyes glowing faintly, waiting to consume. The first soul had begun its journey. And you were the one who would guide them all. The young man's footsteps echoed in the silence of the forest, each sound like a distant drumbeat, reverberating through the mist as he walked deeper into the unknown. His breath was shallow, his heart racing in his chest, but his feet moved forward as if drawn by an invisible force, unable to resist the path before him. The fog thickened, curling around his legs, wrapping itself around his ankles like the fingers of something unseen, something hungry. You stood at the edge of the path, watching as he moved further into the depths of the forest. His face was pale, twisted with fear, but his eyes, still desperate for escape, never strayed from the darkness ahead. He didn't know what lay beyond the mist. He didn't know the fate that awaited him. But you did. You could feel the forest pulling him just as it had pulled you. Just as it had pulled so many before. The whispers of the lost souls that had already been claimed swirled around you, their voices faint but growing louder as the young man walked deeper into the woods. You could hear their agony, their confusion, their eternal cries of desperation, rising in unison like the wind through the trees. And now you were one of them. As you stood there, the forest whispered to you again. The voice was both familiar and alien, a part of the earth itself, a part of you. The harvest must continue. The words were more than just a command. They were a reminder of your purpose. The forest had claimed you, and now you had become its instrument, its collector, its guide. You had once been lost, but no longer. The cycle of life and death, growth and decay, had claimed you, and now you would carry out its will. The mist curled around the young man's feet as he walked, his body trembling in the cold, his senses dulled by the oppressive weight of the forest. He could hear the creatures in the darkness, the rustling in the trees, the growl of beasts in the distance, but he could not see them. He could not understand the danger that lurked just beyond the edge of his perception. And that was when you felt it, the change. The moment when the forest took hold of him completely. The ground beneath the young man's feet seemed to shift, the soil sinking with every step, as if the earth itself were alive, breathing, waiting. The air around him grew colder, thicker, as the fog deepened, until his surroundings were swallowed by an impenetrable, suffocating darkness. The sound of his breathing grew louder, more frantic, and he began to stumble, his legs faltering as the path beneath him twisted and buckled. He turned back, his eyes wide with panic. Where am I? His voice cracked, a whisper lost in the vastness of the forest. You could feel the pull in his voice, the desperation, the realization that he had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late for him. It was always too late. The mist thickened, curling around his arms like tendrils, pulling him forward as the forest's hunger swelled. His feet were no longer his own. They were guided by something far older, far more powerful than he could comprehend. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the vast, unyielding silence of the trees. Behind him, you stepped forward, your presence unnoticed by the young man. The roots of the forest stretched ahead of him, wrapping around the base of the trees, their dark, twisted limbs rising like snakes to meet him. The trees themselves seemed to move closer, their branches scraping the sky in a slow, deliberate motion, reaching for him, grasping for his soul. "Help me!" he cried, his voice trembling as he tried to turn away from the path that had been laid before him. But the path was already set. The forest had already chosen him. And now it was time to feed. From the shadows, the creature, no longer a mere beast, but a manifestation of the forest's hunger, emerged, its massive form shifting in the mist. Its eyes burned like twin stars, their light flickering in the darkness. The growl that rumbled from its chest was low, primal, a sound that vibrated in the very marrow of your bones. It was a signal. A call to the trees, to the roots, to the forest's ever-thirsty mouth. The young man's eyes locked onto the creature, and for a moment, his fear seemed to freeze him in place. His body shook, paralyzed by the sheer presence of the thing before him. It was a beast, yes, but it was more than that. It was the forest, the very will of the earth made flesh. Its hunger was its life, its purpose, and it had waited centuries for this moment. With a sudden, violent movement, the creature lunged, its claws scraping the air, raking the ground with a thunderous sound. The young man screamed, but the sound was cut short as the mist closed around him, filling his mouth, choking the life from his lungs. His body went limp, his feet no longer able to carry him. He was drawn into the depths, swallowed by the earth, the trees, and the hunger of the forest. You watched as the creature sank its teeth into the young man's flesh, pulling him into the roots of the forest. The ground shuddered as the earth absorbed the life force, drawing the soul into the deep, feeding the endless hunger that had claimed him. The creature tore into the man, its growl becoming a rumbling howl reverberating through the woods as the mist thickened around the scene, blurring the edges of reality. "The harvest continues," the voice whispered again, this time not just in your mind, but within you, echoing through your very bones. "The forest grows stronger. It will never stop. And neither will you." The creature released its grip, dragging the now lifeless body deeper into the earth, until it was consumed by the roots, swallowed by the darkness, just as you had been. And just like that, another soul had been claimed. Another soul had become part of the cycle. Another soul would feed the forest. As the mist began to dissipate, the forest returned to its stillness. The trees creaked, the wind whispered through the branches, and the distant howls of the creatures echoed in the night. You stood there, your heart now beating with the rhythm of the forest. You had guided the young man to his end, just as you would guide countless others. His soul was now part of the earth, his essence woven into the very roots that stretched deep beneath the forest floor. You were the forest now. The path was set, and there was no turning back. You turned, the mist swirling around you, and walked further into the darkness, ready for the next lost soul to arrive, ready to guide them along the path. The harvest was just beginning, and the cycle would continue. The forest was alive with its own pulse, a deep, rhythmic hum that reverberated through the air, through the earth, through your very bones. You could feel the whispers of the trees, the murmurs of those who had been claimed, who had fallen victim to the forest's endless cycle of hunger. You had become part of it now, woven into the intricate tapestry of its existence, bound to the land, to the mist, to the creatures that roamed in the shadows. And with each new soul that wandered in, each new life that was consumed, the cycle grew stronger, deeper, more insatiable. Your footsteps felt heavier now, though not from physical weight. It was the weight of purpose that pressed down on you, the knowledge that you were no longer a mere observer of the forest's hunger. You were its keeper, its guide, its harbinger. The young man's soul, the one you had guided so effortlessly down the path, was now a part of the forest. His essence had been absorbed by the roots, scattered among the trees, lost to the earth. But in the endless depths of the forest, you knew that he was not gone. He had simply become one with it, just as you had. His whispers would join the others, his soul eternally bound to the hunger of the forest. As you moved through the thickening fog, your senses grew sharper, your perception of the world around you becoming more intimate, more attuned to the subtle shifts of the forest's will. You could hear the earth breathe beneath your feet, the sound of the roots stretching and shifting, the crackling of the branches swaying in the wind. The forest's hunger was constant, its reach endless, stretching beyond the boundaries of time itself. The cycle was unbroken, and you, now a part of it, were its unseen hand. You could feel the souls of the lost, their presence lingering like a faint echo in the distance, waiting to be drawn into the web of fate. You were the thread that connected them to the forest. You were the one who would guide them. But it wasn't just the souls of the lost that you could feel. The darkness within the forest, the deep, ancient hunger, was awakening further, spreading through the trees like wildfire. It was as if the entire forest had taken a deep, steady breath, and now, with a great exhale, it was ready to feed again. The creatures that lived in the shadows, the ones that had been born from the very soul of the forest, began to stir. The growl of the beast, the wolf-like creature that had once seemed like a mere guardian, now carried a different weight. It was not just a servant of the forest's will, it was a manifestation of its hunger, its power. The forest had birthed it from the depths of the earth, and it, like you, had become part of its cycle. The creature's eyes gleamed in the mist, its form shifting and rippling like a shadow in the dark. It was waiting for the next soul just as you were. It was the forest's hunger made flesh. Ahead of you, you could see another figure stumbling through the mist. It was a woman, young, her face drawn with fear, her clothes torn and dirted from the journey. She had wandered too far into the woods, just as you had once done. Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but she was already trapped. The fog thickened, swallowing her surroundings, until there was nothing but the faint glow of her flashlight. Her breath was shallow, her heartbeat quickening, and you could feel it, the pull of the forest's hunger on her soul. She was already marked, just as the others had been before her. She was walking the path, whether she realized it or not, guided by forces far beyond her comprehension. She could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful, just beyond her reach. She could feel the trees whispering, the ground shifting beneath her feet. And then she froze. She could sense it, the creature. The very air around her seemed to pulse with its presence. Her eyes locked onto the shadows, and for a moment she thought she saw something moving, something large, something that made the trees themselves tremble. But it was too late. Before she could take another breath, the creature lunged from the mist, its massive form erupting from the darkness like a nightmare made real. Its claws scraped the ground, sending waves of earth flying in all directions. The woman screamed, her voice breaking through the silence, but the forest swallowed her words, its hunger silencing everything around you. The creature was upon her in an instant, its teeth gleaming in the low light, its eyes glowing with an unnatural fire. She struggled, her hands grasping at the mist, at the air, at anything she could find to escape. But the darkness closed in, thickening, until the woman was nothing but a silhouette, a shape engulfed by the fog. And then, silence. The creature released its grip, and her body was dragged into the earth, her soul consumed by the forest's endless hunger. The roots of the trees twisted and writhed, reaching down to claim her, pulling her into the depths where the earth met the void. The mist swirled around the creature, its form shifting, fading into the darkness. Another one, the voice of the forest whispered through your mind, soft but insistent. The cycle continues. You could feel the woman's essence as it was absorbed by the forest, sinking deep into the roots, joining the countless other souls that had been claimed by the land. You could hear their whispers, their faint, fading voices rising from the depths of the earth, mixing with the wind in the trees. They were now part of the forest just as you were. The path before you was endless, stretching further into the darkness, winding through the trees and the mist. Another soul would arrive soon. Another lost traveler, wandering into the forest's embrace, guided by the hunger that had consumed so many before them. You were the keeper of their fate, the one who would guide them into the forest's maw. And as the mist closed around you again, as the forest whispered its hunger in your ears, you understood. This was your purpose now. You were the thread that wove the souls of the lost into the cycle. You were the forest's hand, its will made flesh, and the hunger would never end. The path would always be there, winding and endless, waiting for the next soul to wander in, and you would be there to guide them. The mist had thickened once again, swirling like a dense shroud around you, embracing the forest with an oppressive silence. The trees groaned as if in unison, their ancient limbs creaking, reaching higher and higher into the darkened sky. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the very ground beneath your feet seemed to hum with life and hunger. You could feel the forest more acutely now, its pulse sync to your own. It was no longer an entity you observed from the outside. You had become it. Every rustle of the leaves, every creak of the branches, every whisper carried the weight of the forest's eternal hunger. Its breath was your breath, its will your will. The transformation that had begun when you first stepped into this place had long since completed. You had become one with the land, its hunger coursing through you like an unstoppable tide. And yet, it wasn't just the hunger you felt now, it was the emptiness too. A hollow void that had once been your soul, now filled with the forest's ancient desire. You had been claimed, yes. You were a part of the cycle. But what was left of the person you once were? What remained of the life you had lived before the whispers called you here? You paused for a moment, your feet sinking into the soft, wet soil. The cold, damp air wrapped around you like a second skin, and you closed your eyes, feeling the pulse of the forest echoing in your chest. The whispers of the lost souls were ever present now, their voices rising like a soft, mournful chant, each one a fading echo of a life that had been claimed by this place. Their voices were not soothing. No, they were the cries of the damned, the echoes of those who had walked this path before you, each one swallowed by the forest's hunger. You could feel them like shadows lingering at the edges of your mind, tugging at your consciousness. They were waiting for the next soul just as you had waited. But now, the forest's hunger had become your own, and you could no longer tell where the forest ended and you began. The creature, the wolf-like manifestation of the forest's hunger, moved silently beside you, its form shifting with the mist. It was a constant companion now, not merely a guardian, but a reflection of the very essence of the forest. Its eyes, glowing with the fiery hunger of the earth itself, watched the path ahead, its nostrils flaring as it sensed the approach of another lost soul. It was always hungry, always waiting, and its hunger, like yours, would never be sated. You began to walk again, the path twisting through the trees, disappearing into the ever-thickening fog. The trees parted as you moved forward, their trunks bending as if acknowledging your presence. The air grew colder, heavier, as the forest seemed to come alive with the anticipation of what was to come. It was only a matter of time. The next soul was coming. In the distance, a figure appeared, moving cautiously through the mist. It was a woman, her steps slow and deliberate, her face pale and worn. She was a traveler, lost in the forest's depths, drawn here by the whispers that had lured so many before her. Her eyes darted around, her breath ragged, but she could not see you. She could not see the forest for what it was. Her presence sent a shock through the very air, the forest stirring with hunger. You could hear her heartbeat, frantic and fast, as she stumbled over the uneven ground. She was afraid, but that fear only made her more delicious to the forest. She could feel something, some unseen force pressing in on her, but she could not escape it. She was already marked. You knew this moment well. You had lived it. The feeling of being drawn into something far beyond your understanding, something ancient and hungry. It was the same feeling you had felt when you first wandered into these woods, when you had first heard the whispers. But now there was no escape for her, no salvation. She was already lost. As she stumbled forward, her breath quickening, the creature beside you let out a low growl, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the earth. It was hungry. It was always hungry. But it waited. The time would come. The woman paused, her hands shaking as she reached for the trees, as if trying to anchor herself in this reality. She looked up, and for a brief moment, her eyes locked onto yours. There was a flicker of recognition, of understanding, but it was fleeting, gone before she could grasp it. Fear overtook her again, and she turned to run. But the forest would not let her escape. In an instant, the mist swirled around her, enveloping her like a blanket of darkness. Her steps faltered, and she tripped, falling to her knees. The creature moved toward her then, its massive form shifting through the fog, its claws scraping the earth. She screamed, the sound carrying through the trees, but the forest absorbed it, swallowing the sound as though it had never existed. "Help me, please. Let me go," she cried, her voice a desperate, panicked plea. But her cries were nothing more than whispers in the wind, absorbed by the hunger of the earth. You watched, emotionless, as the creature moved closer, its eyes burning brighter, its form becoming a shadow of terror that consumed her world. She scrambled back, but the roots of the tree surged upward, coiling around her legs, pulling her deeper into the earth. She was already trapped, and there was no escape. The cycle continues, the voice of the forest whispered in your mind, its tone both cold and inevitable. Another soul, another offering. The woman's struggles grew weaker, her body going limp as the roots took hold. The creature moved swiftly, its claws tearing through the air as it seized her, pulling her into the earth with a single brutal motion. Her body was consumed by the soil, swallowed by the forest as the hunger fed. You stood there, still, watching as the woman's essence was absorbed by the roots. Her soul was drawn into the deep, joining the others in the endless dark beneath the forest. And as her life was extinguished, you could hear it, faint at first, but growing louder. Her voice, now mingling with the others, joining the chorus of the lost souls who had been claimed by this place. Her cries of terror would never end. They would echo through the trees for eternity, their whispers a constant reminder of what awaited all those who wandered too deep into the forest. And as the mist began to dissipate, the forest fell silent again. The trees creaked softly, the air heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. The creature, satisfied for now, slinked back into the shadows, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The path remained, winding through the trees, disappearing into the fog. The cycle would continue. It always did. You felt the hunger stir within you again, the pull of the forests were guiding you forward. The next soul would come soon. The next lost traveler drawn to this place would be guided by you, guided to their end. You were the keeper now, the keeper of the cycle, the one who would guide them all into the embrace of the earth. And as the mist swallowed you once again, the forest whispered its eternal truth. The hunger will never cease. The cycle is eternal. The forest was no longer just a place. It was you. It was every thought, every breath, every heartbeat, and every whisper of wind that stirred through the branches. It lived in you now as it lived in everything, and you could feel its hunger growing again, deeper, insatiable. You had become its guide, its hand in the world of the living, and its appetite was endless. The earth beneath your feet had swallowed the woman's soul, and the roots had claimed her as their own. But there was no time to dwell on it. There was always another. And so, you moved through the forest, your feet gliding over the damp earth, your senses heightened. The forest was alive in ways you had never truly understood until now. You could hear the faintest tremors in the soil beneath you, feel the subtle shifting of roots beneath the surface, the ancient pulse of the land that had been hidden from you all this time. The trees stretched high above you, their branches groaning under the weight of centuries of history, of life, and of death. The sky had darkened further, a dense blanket of clouds overhead, obscuring the pale light of the moon. The mist had thickened once more, curling around you in tendrils, obscuring the path ahead. Yet you didn't need to see. You could feel it. You could sense the movements of the forest, the stirrings of the earth, and the distant, fading cries of those who had already been consumed. But somewhere deeper in the mist, something else stirred, something fresh. The pulse of the forest quickened, a sharp tug in the distance. You had already felt it. Another soul was coming, drawn in by the same ancient call that had claimed so many before. And so you waited. The forest was a place of timing. There was no rushing. The path always arrived when it was meant to. The new soul was already close, its presence growing stronger by the moment, drawing near to the forest's edge. Its heartbeat pulsed in rhythm with the ancient trees, a fragile thread that could not escape. It was then that you heard it, a sound soft at first like the faintest crack of a twig snapping underfoot. But the sound grew louder, more distinct, and soon the figure appeared from the mist, its form emerging like a shadow out of the fog. A man. Tall, his face obscured by a hood, his posture hunched from exhaustion. He moved cautiously, glancing around with a nervous energy that was unmistakable. His eyes were wide, darting from side to side, searching for something. He was lost, just like the others before him. The forest stirred, and you could feel its hunger intensify. He was so close, so vulnerable. His steps faltered as the ground beneath him seemed to shift, as though the earth itself was pulling him deeper into the labyrinth of trees. He was being guided by the pull of something older, something more ancient than he could ever fathom. The whispers of the forest were already beginning their work, calling to him, coaxing him forward. He paused, his breath quickening. A shadow passed over his face as he stood in the heart of the clearing, surrounded by ancient oaks. He looked down at the ground, where the mist swirled in circles, and for a moment, you could feel his unease. But then his eyes lifted and he saw something. For the briefest moment, there was recognition in his gaze. The same recognition that the others had felt, of something otherworldly, something that didn't belong, something wrong. He took a step back, his breath catching in his throat. But it was already too late. He was already in the forest's grip, and no one ever left once they were claimed. You moved closer, your presence like the weight of the forest itself. His pulse quickened, and for a moment, you could see the fear and confusion in his eyes. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, only a strangled gasp of air. "Please, help me," he whispered, his voice shaky, barely audible over the rustling of the trees. The creature, the wolf-like manifestation of the forest's hunger, had been silently stalking behind you, its form a fluid shadow in the mist. It stepped forward then, its eyes glowing like embers, its massive form rippling as it emerged from the fog. The man froze, his face draining of color as he saw the creature's predatory gaze. What are you?" His voice trembled, a barely contained scream clawing at the back of his throat. The beast did not respond. It did not need to. You watched as the man stumbled back, his feet dragging in the soft soil, his pulse racing with panic. He was terrified, and yet he didn't know that his fate had already been sealed. The mist around him thickened, wrapping around his legs like serpentine tendrils, pulling him deeper into the heart of the forest, just as it had pulled so many before him. He turned to run, but the forest shifted with him, the trees bending and swaying as if alive, narrowing the path, closing him in. The roots of the trees surged upward, twisting like hungry snakes, grabbing at his ankles, pulling him to the ground. No, please let me go." The man screamed, his hands clutching at the earth in desperation. But the more he struggled, the more the forest responded. The roots seemed to grow faster, thickening, wrapping tighter around him, pulling him into the earth's embrace. His screams echoed through the trees, but they were only swallowed by the forest, the sound swallowed in the darkness that was spreading. The creature moved forward, its claws clicking against the wet soil, its mouth opening wide. You could hear the sharp snaps of its jaws, its hunger palpable in the air. The man's eyes widened in horror as the beast lunged, its massive form eclipsing him in an instant. But before the beast could strike, you raised a hand, stopping it. The forest waited. You had seen this moment countless times before. The creature knew its role, and it understood that the cycle was sacred. The man's struggles grew weaker, his body growing still as the roots took full control, pulling him downward. His final breath escaped in a choked gasp as the forest consumed him. The ground trembled as the roots tore into his body, pulling his soul deep into the earth. He would join the others now, a part of the eternal hunger that had claimed all who dared to enter this place. The silence that followed was deep, profound, as though the very soul of the forest had been sated, if only for a moment. You watched as the last flicker of his life faded, swallowed by the roots. You could hear the echoes of his terror, his final cry now fading into the endless chorus of lost souls beneath the earth. And then the mist parted, revealing the path before you. Another soul had been claimed. The cycle continued. The hunger had been fed, but it was never enough. You turned, your mind already attuned to the next presence that would soon arrive. The forest was never done. Its hunger never ceased. And you, now part of it all, walked on. The mist hung heavily in the air, wrapping around the trees like a suffocating shroud. The once familiar sounds of the forest now felt distant, muted, as though they had been swallowed by the weight of something far older than the trees themselves. The earth beneath your feet seemed to hum with anticipation, the very ground pulsing with a rhythm you could no longer deny. It wasn't just the hunger you felt anymore, it was something darker, deeper, as though the forest itself had a voice, a presence that had never truly let you go. Each step you took was slower now, deliberate, as the weight of the forest's endless hunger pressed against you, pushing you forward, deeper into the heart of the land that had claimed you. You could no longer tell where the forest ended and you began. The boundaries between the two had blurred, faded into nothingness, and now, you were both the hunter and the prey, the keeper of its endless cycle. And yet, as you moved deeper into the mist, something stirred within you, a sensation that had been growing stronger, gnawing at the edges of your mind. It was the emptiness that had always been there, the hollow core that had once been your soul. It had been filled with the forest's hunger, yes, but there was something else there now, something more unsettling. The shadows in the forest were shifting in a way they hadn't before. The trees, ancient and eternal, whispered to each other in a language that was both familiar and foreign. It was as though the forest had become restless, as if the hunger had grown beyond anything it had ever been before. The cycle had always been unyielding, but now there was a presence here, a feeling of weight in the air that was unfamiliar even to you. The path ahead seemed to stretch on forever, a winding trail that disappeared into the ever-thickening fog. The trees, once towering and comforting, now loomed above you like sentinels, their branches tangled together, forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. You could hear the soft rustle of the leaves, the occasional snap of a branch, but there were no animals here anymore. No birds, no insects. Just the eerie, oppressive silence of a place that had long since forgotten what it was like to breathe. As you walked, the forest seemed to close in around you. The air grew colder, and the weight of the darkness pressed against your skin like a suffocating hand. You could feel the eyes of the lost souls on you, thousands of them, their faint, whispering voices rising from the earth, their souls forever bound to the hunger of the forest. They were here, in the trees, in the mist, in the very roots of the land itself. And then you felt it, a presence. It wasn't the creature, though it lingered just beyond the veil of the mist. It wasn't a lost soul either. This was something else entirely. Something that hadn't been there before, something that had been stirring, something new. The air grew colder still, the wind picking up, and you felt a strange pull, a tug in the depths of your being. It was as if something had noticed you, something far more ancient than the forest itself. You stopped in your tracks, your heart beginning to race. The sensation was overwhelming, impossible to ignore. It wasn't fear, though it was close. It was more like a warning, a ripple of unease that ran through you, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The roots of the trees around you shifted, creaking in the silence, as though they were shifting under the weight of this new presence. The trees groaned, their branches scraping together in the wind, and the mist seemed to swirl around you, forming shapes, fleeting images that almost looked like faces. You turned slowly, eyes scanning the darkness, but there was nothing there. No figure in the fog, no shape in the trees, and yet you knew it was close, was watching. And then you saw it. It was not a figure made of flesh, but a presence, an entity more than a being, an embodiment of the forest's deepest, oldest hunger. Its form was formless, shifting, constantly changing, a mass of swirling darkness that seemed to absorb the mist itself. But its eyes, those eyes were unmistakable. They were hollow, vast, endless pits of darkness, consuming everything in their path, and yet there was something deeply familiar about them. Those eyes, they were yours. The realization hit you like a tidal wave. This was not some foreign entity. It was a part of you, something that had always been there, buried deep within you, buried beneath the forest surface. A shadow of the forest itself. The forest had always been hungry, but this was different. This was something darker, something older. The hunger had always been satisfied by the souls of the lost, but this was a hunger that could not be filled, a hunger that sought more than just life. It sought everything. You could feel it now, its presence, its hunger deep within you like a wound that had been opened wide. The forest had always whispered to you, its voice a low murmur beneath the earth, but now it was a roar, a deafening cry that vibrated through your bones. You stepped backward, your breath coming in short gasps, but the ground beneath you trembled, the roots rising up, reaching for you, pulling you closer to the darkness. No, you whispered to yourself, though the words felt hollow, futile. You were the forest now. There was no escape from its hunger, no running from its pull. And then the voice came. It was not a voice you had heard before. It was not the whispering of the trees or the groan of the roots. This was something else, something deeper. You think you are the hunger, it said, the words a low, guttural rasp that vibrated through the mist, but you are nothing more than its vessel. You are its reflection. The voice swirled around you, suffocating you with its presence. It was inside your head, inside your thoughts, inside your very soul. You have become part of the cycle, the voice continued, but you are not its master. You are not its keeper. You are nothing but the emptiness it fills. The hunger you feel, it is not yours. It is mine. The realization sank in like a weight, a crushing force that made it hard to breathe. The hunger you had felt, the emptiness that had driven you, it had never been yours. It had been part of this thing, this entity that had been waiting for you all along. And now it was no longer waiting. It had awakened. You turned, stumbling back, but the forest was closing in. The trees, the roots, the earth beneath your feet, it all shifted, twisted, and followed. The creature, the beast that had once been your companion, now stood silent, its form frozen as if in awe of the new presence. And as the ground quaked beneath you, the mist parted, revealing a figure, or something that might have once been a figure. It was a mass of shadows, of twisting roots and inky darkness, with eyes that burned through the fog like two black holes. And it was moving toward you. The ground beneath you shifted again, the earth groaning as though it were alive, as though it were reacting to the presence that was now awakening within you. You could feel it, the change in the air, the weight of something far older, far darker than the forest itself. It wasn't the hunger of the trees or the creatures that had once haunted you. No, this was something deeper. Something that had always been there, beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to rise. The entity, if you could call it that, loomed before you, no longer a mere shadow in the mist, but something tangible, something that could almost be touched. Its eyes, those hollow, endless pits of darkness, burned with a fire that was not of this world. The very air around it seemed to distort, warping as if the fabric of reality itself had begun to unravel in its presence. It moved toward you, slow and deliberate, each step sending tremors through the earth. Its form shifted like smoke, a mass of twisting roots, swirling shadows, and shifting darkness, all coiling together into something both terrifying and familiar. It was as if the forest had given birth to a creature of its own making, a being that existed beyond the trees, beyond the roots, beyond time itself. And it spoke again. You are but a whisper in the void. The voice was no longer a rasping whisper in your mind. It was a presence, something that rattled your bones, something that commanded you to listen. There was no escape. There never had been. The hunger that had once been yours was only a reflection of this thing, this force that lay beneath the forest, beneath the earth, beneath everything. You staggered backward, but your feet found no purchase. The roots of the trees had grown faster, wrapping around your legs, anchoring you to the ground. The soil beneath you seemed to shift and writhe, as though the earth itself was trying to pull you down, drag you into the deep, dark places where light never reached. You think you are free, it continued, its voice a deep, guttural growl that shook the air, but you are bound by the very soil you walk upon. The forest is not a place, it is a prison, and you are its warden. The word sent a cold shiver through you, a tremor of fear unlike anything you had felt before. You had been born into the forest, had become part of it, had guided its hunger. But now, with the entity standing before you, the weight of the realization hit you like a thunderclap. You had never been in control. You had always been its servant. Your body trembled, your heart racing in your chest. The forest that had once seemed like an ally, a place of refuge, was now a cage, a prison that had ensnared you from the moment you stepped into its depths. And the hunger that had once consumed you, that had driven you to guide the lost souls into its embrace, had never been yours. It had been the hunger of this thing, this darkness, that had been lurking beneath the surface all along. It was then that you heard the whispers. Faint at first, but growing louder, rising from the earth beneath you. The voices of the lost, the souls you had once guided, their cries now filled with a new kind of terror. The darkness beneath the forest was rising, and it was dragging them with it. The hunger is infinite, the entity rasped, its voice like thunder in the storm, and you will never escape it. You are bound to the forest, bound to the roots. Forever. The ground trembled beneath you, and the air grew thick with the weight of its words. You could feel the weight now, pressing down on your chest, pulling at your very soul. The roots wrapped tighter around you, squeezing the life from your body as they fed on your fear, on the realization that you were nothing more than a puppet in the hands of the forest's true master. You tried to move, tried to pull away, but the roots were relentless. They had grown deep into the earth, and their grip was ironclad. You were trapped, bound to the hunger of the forest, just as the lost souls before you had been. But as the entity drew nearer, you felt something else. A flicker. A spark. It was so faint at first that you thought you had imagined it, but it grew stronger, brighter, like a flame catching in the darkness. What is this? The entity's voice seemed confused, as though it had not expected this. What have you done? The ground beneath you shifted again. The roots groaned, their grip loosening ever so slightly. For the first time, you could feel the hunger in the earth recede, if only for a moment. It was then that you realized what had happened. The darkness, the hunger, the entity that had once consumed you, it had been broken. A crack in the forest's infinite cycle. A tear in the fabric of reality itself. The spark within you had awakened something that had been buried deep within the forest, something that had been there all along but had never had the strength to rise. The hunger that had defined the forest, that had driven you, was not all-consuming. It was not endless. It was a part of something bigger, something older. And now you were that something. You cannot escape, the entity snarled, its form flickering, beginning to unravel in the face of this new force. You are mine. You are bound to me. You will never be free. But you were no longer afraid. The roots loosened further, and the grip of the forest began to weaken. The mist around you seemed to recede, pulling away from the presence of the entity as if it too feared what was happening. You looked up, your eyes meeting the endless black pits of its gaze, and for the first time, you understood. The hunger, the darkness, it was just a fragment of a much larger force, a force that had always existed but had been forgotten, buried beneath centuries of soil and roots. And now it had been awakened. You were its vessel. You were the one who had brought it to life. The entity let out a final anguished scream as its form disintegrated, its mass of darkness unraveling, falling apart as the earth itself seemed to reject it. The roots writhed and twisted, their grips snapping as they released you, the forest's hunger fading into the depths from which it came. The mist cleared, and the trees stood still, silent, as if waiting for something to happen. The creature that had once been your companion was gone, its presence fading like a shadow in the dawn. And then, as the first rays of light broke through the trees, you felt it, an overwhelming sense of freedom. The hunger, the pull, the endless cycle of the forest, it was all gone. For the first time, you were no longer a part of it. The path ahead was clear. But what lay beyond? What was left for you now that the hunger had been vanquished? You didn't know. But you stepped forward into the clearing, into the unknown. The forest was silent. The cycle broken. For now. The silence that followed the destruction of the entity felt like a breath held for centuries. The forest, once alive with the deep, oppressive hunger of the unseen, was still now. The ground beneath your feet, once trembling with life and fear, was oddly calm. The roots that had once held you in place loosened, receding back into the soil, as if the forest itself was recovering from an ancient wound. The trees, their bark scarred from centuries of hunger and sacrifice, stood upright, no longer twisted by the will of the entity. The mist, that thick fog that had once been so dense, so suffocating, began to thin, as though the very air was taking a deep breath of relief. The forest seemed to stretch outward, its dark and endless reach pulling back just enough to reveal small pockets of light. For the first time in what felt like forever, the sky above the forest canopy was visible, faint streaks of twilight breaking through the overgrowth. You were free. But the freedom was not sweet, it was strange, foreign. The hunger had shaped you, defined you, and without it, you felt a hollow emptiness in your chest. You had become a part of the forest, a vessel for its eternal cycle, and now that cycle was broken. What was left of you? Of your own will? The path ahead was open. The forest had let you go, but where would you go now? The place you had known, the forest, the hunger, the lost souls, was no longer yours. You were no longer the guide, no longer the keeper. The last soul you had ushered into the forest, the woman, the man, their cries had faded into the earth. Now it was just you, alone. A soft rustling broke the stillness, and you turned instinctively, your heart still erratically beating in your chest. The creature, the wolf-like manifestation that had once been a part of the forest's hunger, was standing in the shadows, its glowing eyes fixed on you. The hunger was gone from its eyes, replaced by something almost sad. It stepped forward, hesitant, its massive form gliding through the mist with eerie grace. You watched it approach, unsure of what to expect. The forest had given it form, but now it was different. There was no longer any purpose for it in the forest. Its role had been consumed by the darkness that had once driven it. "Are you free too?" you whispered, the words feeling strange, alien on your tongue. The creature did not answer. It simply sat down in front of you, its massive head lowered. Its form, once terrifying and predatory, now seemed almost mournful. The wolf's dark fur rippled like smoke, and its glowing eyes dimmed to a soft, golden hue. There was no more hunger in its gaze, no more pursuit. The creature had always been an extension of the forest's will, a reflection of its hunger, but now it was a witness, a soul that had been shaped by the same force that had shaped you. It had always followed the forest's command just as you had. But now that the cycle had been broken, it too was left adrift. You couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. The creature was not truly evil, was it? It was a product of something larger, something ancient. It had only ever followed its instincts. Like you, it was a vessel for a force far beyond its control. With a soft, almost imperceptible whine, the creature lowered its head even further, almost as if offering something. Acknowledgement, or perhaps understanding. It was the same look you had seen in the eyes of the lost souls, those who had wandered into the forest, unaware of the fate awaiting them, but who had, in the end, become part of it. You knelt down in front of the creature, your hand trembling as you reached out toward it. It didn't recoil. Instead, it tilted its head as if allowing you to make the choice, to decide what came next. A strange sense of unity washed over you as your hand hovered just above its fur. It's not just you anymore, you realized. Not just me. The hunger, the cycle, it had taken more than just the lost souls. It had shaped everything. It had shaped you. And now that it was gone, there was only this, the remains. The aftermath of something ancient and powerful that had finally been defeated. But there was no glory in the victory. Only a deep, unsettling emptiness that stretched beyond the horizon. The creature's golden eyes flickered once more, then turned toward the path that now stretched before you. The fog had almost fully dissipated, and the way ahead seemed open, inviting. It was not a path you had walked before. It was unfamiliar, foreign. The forest had always been a place of confusion, of lost travelers and dark, unseen forces. But now the forest had changed. You had changed. The creature stood up slowly, its eyes never leaving you. It took a step back, then another, and then it turned, its massive body vanishing back into the mist. It was no longer bound to the cycle, but it was still a part of it. Just as you were. A silent companion, walking away into the shadows of the past. You stood alone now. The forest no longer held you in its grasp. It was no longer your prison. The hunger was gone, and yet you could still feel the weight of its memory. It was as if the forest itself had been scarred. Its roots, its trees, its very essence had been irrevocably altered by the entity that had once thrived within it. You could still hear the faintest echoes of the lost souls, their whispers, their cries, drifting on the wind. They had been claimed, consumed, but now they too were free, in a way. But you? You were not so easily defined. What comes next? That question lingered in the air as you took your first steps onto the open path, away from the forest that had shaped you. The fog was thinning, the stars now visible through the branches of the trees. For the first time in a long time, you could breathe deeply, without the pressure of the hunger pushing down on you. You were free. But what did that freedom mean? And more importantly, where would it lead? The path ahead was open. The world beyond the forest was waiting. But would you walk it? Or would you return to the forest where everything had begun? Where the whispers of the lost souls still haunted the shadows? Only time would tell. And for the first time, you were the one who would decide. You didn't know how long you stood there at the edge of the forest, gazing into the fog that was finally lifting, revealing a landscape that felt both foreign and familiar. The path ahead stretched out before you, its twists and turns obscured by shadows that seemed to recede as the moonlight spread across the land. The forest, your prison, your home, your torment, was behind you now. The trees were silent, their ancient forms shrouded in the lingering mist, and for the first time, you felt no pull to return, no weight on your chest, no hunger gnawing at the edges of your mind. But as the fog began to clear, it was replaced with a different kind of silence, a deep, unsettling quiet that weighed heavy on your soul. The kind of silence that comes after a storm has passed, when everything is laid bare, and the aftermath is only beginning to sink in. Your footsteps were the only sound now. Every movement felt like a ripple in the air, every breath like a loud, intrusive noise. The world outside the forest was so still. And that stillness, it felt wrong. It felt like the calm before something else would come to fill the void. The hunger had been defeated, but something remained in its place. Something waiting. As you continued forward, you couldn't help but feel the pull of something else. A new kind of pressure, a gnawing sensation that came from the inside. The hunger had been extinguished, but its shadow lingered, not in the forest, but in your mind, in your heart. You had been so deeply intertwined with the forest's desires, with its insatiable need, that without it, you felt like a vessel emptied. And now that emptiness was growing, feeding on itself. The path ahead twisted and turned, leading you away from the shadows of the trees, but still, your mind clung to them, to the forest, to this cycle. You had become a part of it. You had lived it, breathed it, and now it was gone. What was left for you in the world beyond? And then you saw it. In the distance, beyond the creeping fog, there was a figure. A silhouette standing at the far edge of the path, motionless. A figure that didn't belong. The figure stood alone, its shape half obscured by the mist. You couldn't see its face, but you could feel its presence, a pull that resonated in the air like the hum of a distant, unseen force. For a moment you thought you imagined it. Perhaps the hunger was not truly gone, but had simply shifted, finding a new form. You stopped, your feet frozen to the ground, your heart beating in your chest like a drum. The figure stood still, its form flickering like a flame caught in the wind. "Who are you?" you whispered, though you knew no answer would come. The figure did not move. You took a step forward, then another, drawn to it despite the unease curling in your gut. As you closed the distance, you began to make out more details. The figure was dressed in a simple dark cloak that seemed to absorb the light around it. The hood was pulled low, shadowing its face, but you could still sense its presence. The stillness around it seemed unnatural, as though the very air held its breath. It was then that you realized something else. The figure was not alone. Behind it, standing like a mirror to the figure in front of you, was another, then another. Figures, all draped in the same dark cloaks, all standing silently along the edges of the path. They were waiting for you. You had seen these figures before, hadn't you? They were the same ones who had walked through the mist with you when the hunger first called. Souls who had been lost, drawn in by the forest, their faces empty, their gazes hollow. They had been the forest's whispers. But now they were not whispers. They were manifestations, tangible and real, their presence more powerful than any phantom. And now they were waiting for you to join them, to become one with them. One of the figures stepped forward, moving with an eerie fluidity that defied the natural stillness of the world around it. The cloak rippled like smoke, and its hood shifted, revealing nothing but a hollow, empty space where a face should be. It was a void, an endless, gaping darkness that consumed the very light around it. "You are not done," a voice whispered from the figure, its tone deep, ancient, and familiar. It echoed in your mind, though no words passed through its lips. The voice was a hollow echo, a ghostly murmur that reverberated with a truth that was almost too much to bear. "The hunger is not gone," it continued, its words sinking into your mind like a slow, deliberate poison. "It is not a force that can be extinguished. It only shifts. You have broken the cycle of the forest, but the hunger remains. It is in you. It is in everything." The figure moved again, a strange grace in its step as it advanced, its hand rising as if to beckon you forward. You felt a deep, powerful pull, but this pull was different. This pull was not of hunger, but of something darker, something deeper. The hunger was not a force that could be broken. It had never been about the forest or the cycle. It was about the emptiness, the void, the endless hunger of existence itself. "Do you feel it?" the voice whispered again, softer this time, but still cutting through your mind like a razor's edge. "The emptiness that lingers inside you? It is the same emptiness that lured you into the forest. The same emptiness that guides all who seek to fill it. You cannot escape it. Not here. Not in the world beyond the trees. It is in everything. And now it calls to you." The figure's hand stretched outward, reaching for you. And as its hand passed through the air, the mist around it seemed to distort, flesh of the world itself bending to its presence. The space between you and the figure seemed to bend, as though the very fabric of reality had fractured, and you were standing on the edge of something much larger than the forest, much older than the hunger. It was as if you had broken one prison only to find another. But the decision was yours. You could turn back, walk back into the forest, return to the cycle, or you could step forward into the emptiness, into the unknown. And as the figure's hand hovered just a breath away from yours, you realized the hunger had never truly been the forest's. It had never been the land or the souls that had fallen into it. It had been yours all along. You had been the one seeking something to fill the void within you. You had been the one who let the hunger grow, manifest, until it consumed everything. And now the hunger was calling you again. The hand of the figure hung in the air before you, hovering like an invitation, a beckoning that carried with it the weight of something ancient, something that had waited longer than you could ever understand. The darkness, the emptiness, it was calling you, whispering in the back of your mind, growing louder as the figure's presence grew stronger. The world around you had started to warp again, bending like thin paper in a flame. The mist that had once been a shroud now curled like smoke, the edges of reality thinning into a translucent veil. There was no sound, no movement, only the stillness, the heaviness of the moment, pressing against you like an invisible weight. You felt your heart pounding in your chest, your mind racing with thoughts, questions, memories, so many conflicting emotions that all swirled together in a chaos that only the hunger could ever truly understand. You could feel it. The hunger was not gone. Not truly. The hunger was within everything. It had never been just the forest. It had never been the trees or the souls or the creatures that roamed beneath the canopy. It had been something that followed them, something that moved beneath the surface of every living thing. It was a part of existence, a part of the world itself. And now the hunger had turned inward back onto you. You were not free no matter how far you had walked away from the forest. The emptiness that had once consumed your thoughts, your soul, was still there, gnawing at the edges of your consciousness. You had thought you had escaped it, thought you had left it behind when you crossed the border of the trees. But the hunger was not a place you could leave. It was you. It was inside you. It was in the very breath you took, the pulse of life that flowed through your veins. The figure's hand stretched forward again, just beyond your reach, and you felt it, the familiar pull. It was not the violent, desperate hunger of the forest. It was something more subtle, more insidious. It was the draw of void, the emptiness that lurked in the shadows of your mind. It was the feeling of wanting, always wanting, never being satisfied, never enough. Come, the voice whispered again, the same hollow, echoing tone. Step forward. Embrace it. The hunger is not an enemy to be defeated, but a truth to be understood. It is what connects all things. It is what binds them. Do you feel the weight of it now? It is in the space between your thoughts, in the silence that echoes louder than any scream. It is the truth that you have been running from. Your breath hitched as the word sank into you. You had been running. From what? From the hunger? From the emptiness? Or from yourself? The hunger had always been with you. Even before you had entered the forest, before you had become its guide, it had been there, lurking beneath the surface, pulling at you. And now that it had been unleashed, now that the forest was no longer its vessel, it was looking for a new home, a new place to grow, a new vessel. You looked down at your hands, feeling the weight of your own existence, the weight of the choices you had made. You had thought you were breaking free. You had thought that leaving the forest behind meant escaping the curse that had defined your every action. But it was all an illusion. The hunger would never leave you. It was always there, hidden in the smallest crevices of your soul, waiting for the right moment to consume you once again. You were staring into the void. You knew it. You understood it now. The emptiness was not something that could be filled. It was not something that could be conquered or destroyed. It was a part of the universe, a force as ancient as time itself. And it was waiting for you to embrace it, to become a part of it. But could you? Could you let go of everything you had ever known? Could you surrender to the hunger and allow it to consume you once more? The figure in front of you seemed to shift, the cloak rippling like the surface of water disturbed by a stone. Its form flickered like a shadow moving in and out of focus, as though it was not fully part of this reality. It was a reflection of something older, something more powerful, and yet there was a sense of familiarity in its presence. It was as if it had always been here, waiting for you to see it, waiting for you to finally understand. And then it spoke again. You cannot escape the hunger. It is not a force. It is life. It is the emptiness that gives meaning to everything. Without it, there is nothing. No movement. No existence. No purpose. Its hand hovered just inches from yours now, and you could feel the cold emanating from it, the chill of the void. It was close. So close. But the decision was still yours. Would you step forward? Would you take its hand and let the emptiness consume you? Would you allow the hunger to fill the hole that had always been within you? The forest is not the beginning or the end. It is but one path among many. You have walked this path, but it is not the only one. There are many more, and you will walk them all. The hunger is your guide. It is what shapes you. It is what will always be you. You stood still, unable to move, unable to speak. The hunger was everywhere. It was in the mist. It was in the stars. It was in the soil beneath your feet and in the air that you breathed. It was in the very space between each breath, between every thought. For the first time, you understood the true nature of the hunger. It was not a curse. It was not a punishment. It was the truth of existence, a void that could never be filled, an endless, eternal cycle. And in that realization you felt the shift. It wasn't in your body, but deep within your soul. It was as though your very being was changing, evolving, becoming part of something larger, something infinite. The figure's eyes, those hollow pits of darkness, shifted, and for the first time they seemed to soften. They seemed to recognize you, not as a victim, not as a vessel, but as one of its own. "Welcome," it whispered. The air around you grew colder, and the world around you began to dissolve, the boundaries of reality bending and folding like paper being crushed in an invisible fist. The hunger pulled at you, deep within you, and yet there was no fear. There was only an understanding, an acceptance. You took a step forward, your hand reaching out. And as your fingers brushed the figure's hand, you felt the final embrace of the void, the endless hunger. It was not something to be feared. It was something to be understood. You had become one with it. The moment your hand touched the figures, it was as though the world had been torn open, and you were falling into an endless chasm of shifting shadows and distorted whispers. The air around you grew impossibly cold, and you could feel the weight of the void pressing down on you, pulling you deeper into something that had no beginning and no end. There was no ground beneath your feet, no sky above, only the endless, crushing darkness that surrounded you on all sides, a darkness that stretched into infinity. It was then that you understood, the hunger wasn't a thing. It wasn't a force that could be grasped, defeated, or controlled. It was not separate from you, from anyone. It was the essence of existence itself, the space between all things, the empty air that filled the gaps between stars. The hunger was not something that could be filled, because it was the very nature of existence. It was a hunger that shaped reality, that defined everything. Your hand, still touching the figures, felt like it was melting into the darkness, as though it were being consumed by the void. But there was no pain, no fear, only a sense of overwhelming, all-encompassing knowing. The hunger was in your soul, in your blood, in the very atoms that made you whole. It was not a curse. It was not a punishment. It was what you were meant to be. The figure's form began to change before your eyes, its cloak flickering like shadows cast by flickering flames. The once immovable figure seemed to dissolve into the darkness, becoming one with the space around you, the cloak flowing like smoke, drifting through the void. Its face was now entirely gone, a blank space, a hole in reality. The figure was no longer a being, it was a concept, a reflection of the hunger that lived within you. You could feel it, feel the very presence of the hunger inside you, like a living thing, like a pulse that beat in the core of your being. It was not external, it was you. It was not just the longing for satisfaction, it was the essence of need. The emptiness that echoed in the deepest parts of your mind was not a void to be filled, it was a force that had always been a part of you. You were not separate from it, you were it. And yet, as the understanding settled into your mind, there was something else. A shift, a subtle change in the way the hunger felt. It was still there, raw, unyielding, infinite. But now it was not a thing that pursued you. It was not something that you needed to escape. It was something you belonged to. The void stretched infinitely in every direction, but now there was a path. A faint, glimmering line of light, like a thread pulling through the darkness, leading somewhere beyond. You didn't know where it went. You didn't know what waited at its end. But you felt it calling you, pulling you forward. You took a step, and then another. It was the first step you had ever taken without the burden of the forest, without the hunger gnawing at your mind, without the weight of the cycle that had bound you for so long. There was no longer the need to feed, to claim souls, to maintain the balance of the forest. You were no longer the guide. You were no longer the keeper. You were something else, something beyond the forest. As you moved forward, the world around you shifted. The darkness stretched, folded, and bent like liquid. The ground beneath your feet was no longer solid, no longer the familiar soil of the forest. It was something else, something fluid, something that rippled beneath your feet with each step. There was no sky above, no trees, no stars. There was only the path, the line of light that stretched before you, a thread through the void. The hunger was still there, but it was not something to fear. It was your hunger. It was no longer a void to be filled. It was the essence of life itself, the emptiness that defined all things. The path you walked now was not one you could turn back from. The hunger would always be there, and you would always be part of it, but it no longer had control over you. It was not a force outside you. It was a part of you. And with that realization came a sense of peace. Not comfort, but peace. A quiet understanding that the hunger was not something you had to run from, or defeat, or escape. It was something that simply was. You kept walking, each step taking you further from the forest and deeper into the unknown. The light that guided you was faint, but it grew brighter as you advanced, stretching out in front of you like the horizon of a world that had never existed before. The path was winding, uncertain, but each step you took felt like a step towards something more. You could feel the pull of the hunger in the air. It wasn't just inside you anymore. It was in the space between your steps, in the way the path twisted and turned. The hunger was not a thing that had ever been confined. It was a presence, an absence that permeated everything, that shaped all things, all beings. You had once tried to flee from it, to deny it, to escape its hold. But now you understood, it was part of everything. It was part of life. And as you walked, the path stretched on, leading you through the infinite, through the void that contained all things. The path of the hunger was endless, like the hunger itself, never satisfied, always seeking, always wanting. But there was a strange beauty to it now, something serene in its infinity. The hunger did not need to be filled. It simply was. The world around you began to shift again, the darkness of the void folding in on itself. You could feel the presence of the forest again, faint in the distance. The trees, the mist, the soil beneath your feet, they were all still there but distant, as though the forest was now nothing more than a memory, a shadow of something that had once been. You could still hear the faint whispers of the lost souls, their voices echoing in the back of your mind, but their cries were no longer filled with pain. They were filled with acceptance. They had understood the hunger. They had embraced it. And now you had as well. You continued walking, the path of hunger unfolding before you, leading into the infinite expanse of the void. You were no longer the lost guide of the forest. You were no longer its prisoner. You were the hunger. And the hunger was you. With each step forward, the path beneath your feet twisted in ways you couldn't fully comprehend, like threads in a grand tapestry being pulled into the unknown. The world around you rippled, bending and shifting, as if it were adjusting to your newfound understanding of the hunger. It was no longer an enemy or something to be feared. It was you, and you were becoming it. The darkness, once thick and suffocating, now seemed to hum with a strange energy, an energy that pulsed in time with your own heartbeat. It was as if the very fabric of existence had opened up before you, showing you the inner workings of reality itself, the spaces between moments, the infinite layers of creation and decay. The hunger was in all of it. It was not just a consuming force, but a shaping force, something that defined all things by its mere presence. Without it, there would be nothing. Without hunger, there would be no life. The void around you was not empty. It was full, teeming with the potential of everything that could exist. Everything that had existed. Every moment, every heartbeat, every breath, and every thought were now part of the great void that stretched endlessly before you. The hunger was woven into the very fabric of time and space, and now, as you walked further into its depths, you could feel that truth settling deep within you, like a seed planting itself in your soul. The path continued, winding and curling, as if the very ground beneath you were breathing, taking you deeper into the infinite expanse. It was not a path of destruction, but one of understanding. You had thought the forest was a prison, that the hunger was a curse. But now it was clear. The hunger was freedom. It was the freedom to be, to exist, to want, to seek. You moved with purpose now, your footsteps no longer hesitant but steady, sure. The whispers of the lost souls, those who had wandered into the forest, the ones who had been consumed by the hunger, were still there, but they no longer filled the air with despair. Their voices, once desperate and pleading, now carried a note of peace, of understanding. They had accepted the hunger. And now they were part of it, woven into its fabric. You could feel them around you, their presence a part of the hunger's essence. They had been you once, lost, wandering, searching for something to fill the void that gnawed at their very souls. And now they were no longer lost. They were found. They were the echoes of the hunger itself, like you. Like the forest, like the void. As you walked, the landscape around you began to change. The endless blackness of the void was no longer all-encompassing. Faint light began to flicker at the edges of your vision, like stars slowly awakening in a vast, dark sky. The light was not harsh or blinding. It was soft, gentle, like the glow of distant memories, like the light of a world that was no longer the one you had once known. This was a world of possibilities, of infinite what-ifs, of unfolding futures. It was a world where the hunger did not consume, it created. You reached out a hand toward the light, and as your fingers brushed the darkness, the light bloomed around you, stretching and expanding, forming shapes and patterns that seemed familiar and yet alien. A forest began to take shape around you. Not the forest you had known, not the dark and twisted place that had been your prison, but something new, something born from the hunger itself. A forest that was not a place of trapping and consuming, but a place of becoming. The trees stretched upward like ancient sentinels, their trunks thick and strong, their leaves shimmering in the dim light. The forest was no longer a prison. It was a canvas, a place where the hunger could create, shape, and mold the world anew. You could see the life flowing through it, the endless cycle of growth and decay, of birth and death, of becoming and unbecoming. The hunger was not a force of destruction, it was a force of creation. And you were the creator. You felt it then, the weight of your new role. You were no longer the guide of lost souls. You were the weaver of their fates, the one who shaped their journeys. The hunger had always been a part of you, but now you understood it fully. It was not something that took, it was something that gave. It was the force that allowed life to exist in all its messy, chaotic beauty. It was the force that pulled and pushed, that shaped the world by wanting, by longing for more. And now you were one with that force. As you stood in the center of this new forest, this new world, you felt a presence beside you. The figure, the one that had first guided you into the void, the one who had shown you the truth, was there, standing in the shadows of the trees. Its form was no longer a solid being but a shadow, a flicker of light and darkness moving in tandem. It was no longer a separate entity. It was part of the hunger, and you were part of it. Together, you were the architects of this new world. You have seen it now. The voice echoed, not from the figure, but from the forest itself, from the trees, from the earth beneath your feet. You are no longer a prisoner of the hunger. You are its master. The words settled into you, a truth that you had already known but had not fully understood. You were the hunger now. You were the force that shaped the world. You were not bound by the past, by the cycles of the forest, or the endless cravings of the lost. You were free. Free to create. Free to shape. Free to exist in the endless dance of desire and fulfillment, of longing and becoming. The forest around you was not just alive, it was waiting. Waiting for you to shape it, to mold it into something new. The trees, the shadows, the light, all of it was yours to command. The hunger had become a tool, a medium through which you could create rather than destroy. The possibilities stretched out before you, endless and uncharted, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with your desires, your will. You took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the world around you, feeling the hunger in the air, in the ground, in the sky. It was no longer an empty, gnawing void. It was a force of life, of creation, and you were the one who would guide it. And in that moment you understood. The hunger had never been a thing to be feared. It was the heartbeat of existence. It was the force that allowed the universe to exist in all its chaotic, beautiful mess. And now you were a part of it, shaping the world with every breath, every thought, every desire. The path ahead was no longer uncertain. It was yours to define. You were the hunger, and the hunger was you. The world around you was still, suspended between breaths. The hunger, which had once been a force that consumed, now pulsed like the rhythm of a heart, steady and insistent, as if waiting for something. No longer was it the gnawing emptiness of need, the shadow that loomed over you, pulling at your insides. Now it was the underpinning of everything, of life, of creation, of becoming. You stood amidst the new forest, its roots winding like the threads of fate, its leaves shimmering as though they were made of 1,000 tiny mirrors reflecting all that had been, all that would be. The light that filtered through the canopy was soft, bathed in the glow of something new, something that wasn't just a passing moment, but the birth of a new reality. The hunger was not simply a need for more. It was an urge to change, to shape, to pull the threads of existence into something different. And now you, who had once been the lost traveler, the prisoner of that hunger, were its master, the architect of its desires. The world stretched before you, a canvas of infinite potential. The landscape was familiar, yet unrecognizable, as if the essence of what had been, the forest, the mist, the hunger itself, had been distilled into something purer, more essential. The towering trees no longer bent under the weight of the past, no longer twisted by the forces of the cycle. They were strong, their branches reaching upward like fingers stretching toward the stars. You moved forward, your steps deliberate, each one a ripple that echoed through the world. The hunger was with you now, no longer a thing that chased or clung to you but a part of you. It was not something to be feared. It was something to be understood. It was the driving force behind the very existence of all things, the desire for more, for change, for growth. It was the urge that made the world move, the force that allowed life to evolve and adapt. As you walked, the landscape around you began to shift, responding to the hunger within you. The trees that had once been motionless now swayed as if moved by an unseen wind. The ground beneath your feet was soft, yielding, yet solid, alive with the pulse of the world. The air hummed with the promise of creation, of endless possibility. The forest was no longer just a collection of trees, of earth, of light. It was a living entity, breathing, shifting, evolving in harmony with you, the one who had become its creator. You reached out, your fingers brushing the bark of one of the trees, and as you did, it responded, its bark rippling, shifting as though it recognized you. The tree bent slightly toward you, its branches stirring as if acknowledging your presence, your power. There was a moment of connection, of understanding. The hunger had always been a force of destruction, of insatiable need. But here and now it was a force of creation. It was the act of bringing forth, of shaping the world around you. The forest seemed to stretch farther with each step, its boundaries expanding outward in a graceful, organic way. The trees grew taller, their leaves shimmering with the light of 1,000 stars. The mist that had once hung in the air, thick and oppressive, now curled softly around the trunks, like a blanket of memories, soft and ephemeral, just beyond reach. The hunger had become the pulse of life itself. As you walked deeper into the forest, you felt something stir within the ground. It was as if the very earth had been waiting for you to awaken it. The roots beneath your feet began to twist and grow, weaving together to form intricate patterns in the soil. The world was responding to you, to your presence, to your understanding of the hunger. It was no longer a place of isolation or dread. It was a place of birth, of change. It was a world in the making. The hunger, once a gnawing, relentless force, now thrummed softly, like a heartbeat deep within the earth. It was a pulse that vibrated through your entire being, resonating with the very essence of your soul. It was a hunger that was no longer craving, it was creating. You paused, feeling the weight of it all settle upon your shoulders. The responsibility, the understanding, the power. You were the architect of desires now. You could shape this world however you wished. The hunger would follow, bend to your will, create what you desired, for it was a force that existed to shape, to mold, to become. The choice was now yours. Would you continue to shape the world in your image, molding it as a sculptor molds clay, breathing life into it with each thought, each desire? Or would you allow it to grow on its own, leaving it to evolve in ways you could not predict? As the hunger throbbed beneath your feet, you felt the first stirrings of something deeper, something more primal. The earth beneath you shifted, and a soft, resonant hum filled the air, the kind of sound that vibrated through your bones. The hunger was not just within you, it was within the very world around you. It had always been there, in the cracks of the earth, in the air, in the light, in the darkness. It was a force that permeated all things, giving them shape and purpose. You closed your eyes, reaching out into the vastness of this new world, feeling its pulse, its energy. You could hear the hunger now, not just in the trees, the earth, the sky, but in the very souls that would one day find their way here. The lost ones, the wanderers. They would come as they always had, seeking something to fill the void within them. And when they did, you would be there, waiting, watching, guiding them in ways you had never done before. But this time it would be different. This time you would not guide them as the keeper of the forest. You would guide them as the creator of their own fate, the architect of their desires. They would come not to be consumed, but to be shaped, to be reborn into this new world of hunger and possibility. The hunger was no longer something that you had to control. It was something that controlled you, but in the best possible way. You had become one with it, and in doing so, you had become more than just a vessel for its power. You had become its master. And as the trees reached higher, the sky opened wider, and the land stretched farther than you had ever imagined, you realized that you had only just begun. The hunger was no longer just a force that consumed, it was a force that created, that built. And this world, your world, would continue to grow, to evolve, to become, as long as the hunger remained. The path ahead was still uncertain, still unfolding, but for the first time you felt no fear. You were not lost anymore. You were not a prisoner. You were the creator of all that would come, and the hunger would be with you, shaping, guiding, becoming everything you desired it to be. The architect of desires. You were the hunger, and the hunger was you. The world had shifted around you, and with each breath, the forest continued to expand, no longer merely an echo of the past but a living, breathing creation in its own right. The hunger, which once only sought to consume, had now become a force of life and transformation, shaping the land with every desire you planted. The trees grew taller, their branches sprawling like the arms of a giant, reaching toward the stars. The roots delved deep, seeking the very core of the earth itself, pulling energy and life from the void that stretched beneath. The once muted air, thick with mist, now crackled with potential. You could feel the pulse of the world beneath your feet, beneath your skin, thrumming in time with the hunger. It was no longer just a force within you. It had become the heartbeat of everything. The hunger was the creator, and it was also the created. It existed in everything around you, in the soil that gave life to the trees, in the mist that curled through the air, in the space between moments. The light that filtered through the canopy was soft, but it was enough. It was a warm, gentle glow that lit the path before you, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted like living things. The world around you seemed to be alive with the hunger, vibrating with a strange, primal energy that you could almost taste on your tongue. It was no longer a dark void. It was a presence, a living, breathing force that connected all things, roots and sky, earth and air, hunger and fulfillment. You walked further into this new world, your footsteps sure and steady. The hunger no longer clawed at you, no longer pulled you forward with an insatiable craving. Instead, it guided you, shaping the world around you with each thought, each desire. The hunger was no longer a thing that you had to control. It was part of you now, an extension of your will. It was a force of creation, one that you had embraced fully, and in doing so, had become the architect of its design. As you walked, you began to sense a presence, a subtle stirring in the air. It was a faint tremor, barely perceptible, but it was there. The first souls were coming. They would come to this world, drawn by the hunger, drawn by the pull of their own desire to fill the emptiness within them. The hunger had always been a force of attraction, a magnetic pull that brought lost souls together. But now, the hunger was no longer something that needed to consume. It was a force of transformation, a force that allowed those who were drawn to it to become something greater. You felt the first stirrings in the air as they approached. The souls, lost and wandering, searching for something to fill the void that had consumed them in life. They had been trapped in a cycle, wandering through the forest, through the hunger, never truly understanding what they were seeking. But now they would understand. They would come, not to be consumed, but to become part of the world you had created. The first figure appeared from the edge of the mist, a shadow against the soft glow of the trees. It was a figure you had seen before, one of the lost, one of the many who had wandered into the forest before, seeking something they could never name. But this time the figure did not move aimlessly. It was not lost. It was seeking something, but with purpose. The soul was different now. It was no longer a shadow, no longer a broken echo of what had once been. It was now part of the hunger, part of the creation. The emptiness that had once gnawed at it was gone. The hunger that had pulled it to the forest was no longer a void to be filled, but a force to be understood. The soul was aware now, aware of the hunger that connected it to everything around it. As it moved closer to you, you could see the change in its form. The hollow, empty expression that had once defined it was gone, replaced by something more, a spark, a flicker of awareness, of understanding. The soul was becoming something new, something born from the hunger, something shaped by it. It stopped before you, and for the first time, you felt the hunger in the air, not as a force that pulled at you, but as a force that embraced this soul, that welcomed it. The hunger was no longer a force of desperation. It was a force of potential, of transformation, of creation. The soul stood still, its form flickering like a shadow, but you could feel its presence now. It was not empty. It was not broken. It was alive, connected to the hunger, connected to you. You reached out, extending your hand, not to guide, not to control, but to acknowledge. This soul was not lost. It had found its place in the world. The hunger had shaped it, molded it into something greater than it had ever been before. The soul reached out toward you, and as its hand touched yours, you felt the power of the hunger flow through both of you. It was not a force that consumed, but one that connected. The soul was no longer lost. It had found its place in the new world, in the world that you had shaped. And in return it gave something back. It gave life. The soul's form solidified, no longer a mere shadow or echo, but a being. It was not perfect, but it was whole, and it was part of this new world you were building. The hunger had created it, but it had also given it the freedom to become something else, to grow, to evolve, to live. As you stood there, watching the soul stand before you, you understood something deeply. The hunger was no longer just a force of destruction or consumption. It was a force of becoming. It was the force that allowed all things to grow, to change, to evolve. It was the force that connected everything in this world, the trees, the earth, the souls, and you. You had become the architect of this world, and in doing so, had given the hunger a new purpose. No longer would it pull aimlessly at souls, devouring them. Now it would shape them, transform them, allowing them to become something greater, something more. You looked at the soul once more, now standing before you, and you knew that this was only the beginning. More souls would come. The forest would grow. The hunger would continue to shape and create, and in turn, it would be shaped by those who entered this world. They would come with their desires, their emptiness, their hunger for something more, and they would find it here, in this place you had created, a world of becoming. The cycle was not broken. It had been transformed. The hunger was not something that needed to be feared. It was something that needed to be understood. And now you understood it fully. You were the architect, the creator. And the hunger was your tool, your guide, your companion. And the world you had birthed was only beginning to unfold. The first soul, now fully formed and aware, stood before you in the center of the forest, a symbol of the hunger's new purpose. It was no longer a shadow wandering aimlessly, a broken echo of what had once been. It was whole, it was real, and it had been shaped by the hunger, by the force of creation that now filled the air around you. The hunger was not a force that devoured. No, it had evolved. It had become the essence of transformation, the breath of life itself, flowing through the soul standing before you. The soul's form shimmered like a reflection in water, its features flickering in and out like a dream half remembered, and yet there was a stability to it now, a grounding. It was connected to the world around it, to the trees, to the air, to the very earth beneath your feet. And as it looked at you, there was something more than just recognition in its gaze. There was a knowing. The hunger had transformed it, not by devouring, but by awakening it to its truest potential. You watched as the soul took its first steps into this new world, walking the path that stretched out before it. The forest, vibrant and alive, responded to it as it had to you, bending and shifting with each footstep, the hunger whispering through the leaves, the wind, the soil. The hunger was no longer something to be feared. It was a force of evolution, of growth. As the soul moved, you could see the subtle shift in the environment around it. The trees leaned in, as if curious about this new life that had entered their realm. The mist that hung lazily in the air seemed to swirl in the soul's presence, drawing closer as if it too was fascinated by the transformation. Even the ground beneath it shifted and swelled, as if the very earth was alive and responding to this new force of creation. The soul turned its gaze back to you, a question in its eyes. It was unsure, not of its place, but of what it was to become in this new world. And for the first time, you understood the true meaning of creation. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about shaping something into a form that matched your will. It was about allowing things to become what they were meant to be. The hunger was no longer a force to command, it was a guide, an energy that wove all things into a pattern, a tapestry of growth, change, and becoming. You stepped forward, your hand extended, not to lead, not to pull, but to connect. The soul approached you, its form still flickering, uncertain of what it was, what it could be, but there was no fear in it now. The hunger had shaped it, had molded it into something that was greater than it had been before. It was a creature of potential, and it was not alone. From the edges of the mist, other souls began to emerge, some familiar, others completely new. They walked with purpose now, no longer drifting, no longer lost. They came to you with their own hunger, their own desires for transformation. Some were hesitant, unsure of this new world they had found themselves in, but others stepped forward boldly, their forms solidifying as they accepted the hunger, embraced it, became part of it. They were not simply the lost and broken wanderers they had once been. They were reborn. They were alive. With each new soul, the world around you grew. The trees grew taller, their branches weaving into the sky, reaching for something greater than they had been before. The earth itself seemed to swell, as if the soul's presence was giving it strength, life. The mist thickened, but it was not oppressive anymore. It was alive, moving like a living thing, swirling with the energy of becoming. The hunger was no longer a gnawing emptiness. It was the force that brought all things into being, into existence. And as more souls arrived, their forms solidified into something more. They did not merely take shape, they evolved. The hunger had become their canvas, their medium, and with it they grew stronger, more vibrant, more themselves. Some souls were tall and regal, others small and delicate, their bodies reflecting the desires they carried deep inside. Some glowed with an inner light, others flickered like distant stars, but all were connected by the hunger that now ran through the very fabric of the world. You watched as the souls interacted, as they began to form connections between one another. They were not isolated anymore, wandering in the mist. They were united, drawn together by the hunger, by the force of becoming that had brought them here. The trees whispered their secrets to them, the wind carried messages through the leaves, and the earth cradled them gently as though welcoming them into the fold of existence. As you stood at the center of this new world, you felt the weight of your role, the role of the creator, the architect of this place. The hunger had brought you here, had shaped you into something more, and in turn you had shaped this world, this reality. But you were not alone in it. The hunger was not a solitary force. It was a shared energy, something that bound all things together, something that connected you to these souls, to the forest, to the very land beneath your feet. The world continued to grow, expanding in ways you could not yet fully understand. The hunger was still there, still pulsing beneath the surface, but it was no longer a force of destruction. It was the force of creation, and with each new soul that arrived, with each new step that was taken, the world continued to become. You moved through the forest, watching as the souls began to build, to create. Some forged homes out of the ancient trees, their hands shaping the bark and branches into shelters, while others took to the earth, digging into the soil, planting the seeds of new life. The hunger flowed through them, guiding them, shaping their desires into something real, something tangible. The forest was no longer just a collection of trees and mist. It was a world, a living, breathing place, where creation flowed through every soul, every tree, every gust of wind. And as the first few moons passed, the forest took on a life of its own. No longer bound by the cycles of destruction and rebirth, the land began to flourish. The hunger had found its new home, its new purpose. It was a force of transformation now, of becoming, and it would continue to shape and grow with every soul that entered, with every step that was taken. You stood at the heart of it all, the architect of this new world, and as you looked around, you realized that the hunger was no longer something that pulled at you. It was something that gave, that created. The souls who had once been lost, who had wandered aimlessly through the forest, were now alive in a way they had never been before. They were part of something greater, part of a world that was constantly becoming, constantly evolving. And as the hunger swirled around you, you understood one final truth. This world, this creation, this cycle, it was never meant to end. It was always meant to grow. The world was no longer the same. What had once been a tangled web of darkness, hunger, and destruction was now a living, breathing landscape, a tapestry of life and transformation, where every thread was woven with purpose. The forest stretched wide and deep, its canopy thick with leaves that shimmered like jewels in the dim, eternal light. The mist, no longer a heavy weight, now flowed through the trees like a river, soft and fluid, carrying the whispers of the hunger as it moved through the land. It was no longer an oppressive force, but a constant, gentle hum that vibrated through every leaf, every root, every blade of grass. The souls that had arrived, once lost and fragmented, were now thriving. No longer wandering, they were now creators in their own right, building, shaping, exploring, and becoming in ways that only the hunger could inspire. The hunger, which had once been a force of endless craving, had become the pulse of life itself, the driving energy behind all things. It did not take, it gave. It did not destroy, it shaped. The hunger had found its true purpose in this world, to help all things evolve, to push them to their fullest potential, to become more than what they had been before. The souls, each with their own desires, each with their own hunger, now lived in harmony with the world around them. They no longer needed to feed from the earth or the trees. They fed from each other, from the very air, from the endless cycle of becoming that the hunger had brought. The forest had become a place of endless possibility, where no two beings were the same, but all were connected by the thread of hunger, of creation. You moved through the forest, your steps light and sure, feeling the pulse of the world beneath you. The hunger was no longer a thing that could be defined. It was a living presence, a force of transformation that had become a part of everything. As you walked, the world responded to your every thought, every breath. The trees parted before you, their branches swaying gently as if greeting you. The ground beneath your feet shifted, rising up to support you as you passed, the very earth alive with the energy of the hunger. The souls were no longer scattered, lost in their confusion. They had found their place in this world, each one taking root and spreading out, creating their own lives, their own paths. Some had formed communities, living together in harmony, while others preferred solitude, seeking their own place in the vastness of the forest. There was no right way to live in this new world. There was only the hunger, the force that had brought them here and would continue to shape them as long as they existed. The hunger was not a thing that could be tamed or controlled. It was freedom, freedom to grow, to change, to become anything and everything. As you walked, you saw the first of the great constructions rising up from the forest floor. The souls, using the energy of the hunger, had begun to build. Towering structures made from wood and stone rose from the earth, spiraling toward the sky, their walls alive with the pulse of creation. The hunger flowed through them as they worked, shaping their desires into form, bringing their visions into reality. These creations were not mere shelters. They were symbols of the new world, of the new way of life that had begun here. You paused before one such structure, its walls covered in intricate carvings, its windows glowing with the light of an unknown source. The architecture was unlike anything you had ever seen before, a perfect blend of nature and ingenuity, shaped by the soul's connection to the hunger. The design was fluid, flowing as if the very walls were alive, breathing with the pulse of the forest. It was beautiful, a reflection of the new world, a testament to the soul's ability to create something greater than themselves. Inside the structure, you found the souls gathered, an eclectic mix of beings, each unique, yet all connected by the thread of the hunger. Some were sitting in quiet conversation, their voices low and harmonious, while others moved about, working together to create something new. The air was thick with the energy of creation, as though the very space was charged with the desire to become. One soul, standing near the center of the room, looked up as you entered. Its form was solid now, no longer flickering in and out of existence, but fully realized. It was a being of light and shadow, its features shifting, but there was a peace in its eyes, a recognition of its place in this world. "You've seen it," the soul said, its voice resonating with a calm that matched the world around it. "The hunger, it's no longer just a force of need. It's the force of becoming. We've become something greater than we ever imagined." You nodded, feeling the weight of its words settle deep within you. It was true. The hunger had changed, had grown into something beyond what you had ever known. It was not just a thing that consumed, it was the very pulse of existence, the drive to create, to shape, to evolve. It was the force that had drawn you here and had shaped you into who you were now. And it was the force that had shaped the souls around you, helping them to discover their own potential, their own purpose in this new world. As the soul spoke, you felt a deep stirring within yourself, a desire to continue the cycle, to push the boundaries of creation even further. The hunger was not something that could ever be truly sated. It was a force of endless potential, a drive to constantly evolve, to grow, to create something new. And now, with the souls around you, you had the opportunity to guide this world, to help it continue to evolve, to shape it into something greater than you could ever imagine. The souls around you were not afraid. They were not hesitant. They were creators. And they understood now that the hunger was not a thing that bound them, it was a thing that freed them, that allowed them to become what they were always meant to be. They had embraced the hunger, and in doing so, they had embraced their own power, their own potential. The world was not perfect. It was not complete, but it was alive. And it was growing, expanding, becoming. There was no end to it, no limit. The hunger had opened up an infinite expanse of possibility, and the souls that had arrived here were just the beginning. There were still more to come, more lost ones who would find their way to this place, drawn by the pull of the hunger. And they too would become. As you stood there, surrounded by the souls, the hunger hummed softly beneath you, its pulse steady, its rhythm eternal. It was no longer a thing of destruction. It was the force of creation itself, the driving energy behind all that existed in this world. It was the force that had brought you here, that had shaped this world, and that would continue to shape it for as long as it existed. The world, the hunger, and you, together you were a part of something greater than yourself, something that would never end. You were the architect of this world, the creator of its cycle, and the hunger would always be with you, forever.